Julian Raven. How are you?
Doing great, Rich. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
I'm so glad to have you on. I really am looking forward to walking through your story.
Wonderful.
Let me give the audience a brief introduction for you here. You are an internationally trained artist. You studied at the College of Arts in London and English schools in Marbella, Spain, grounding your work in classical and contemporary art principles. You have diverse medium expertise, working across painting, sculpture, fine art, photography, woodworking, and large format installations, known for bold, abstract expressionism. You have a studio and gallery, and you're a founder of, established in Elmira, New York, Lynchburg, Virginia, and most recently, Marbella, Spain, creating spaces for both exhibition and community engagement. You're a cultural entrepreneur where you curate exhibitions, host artist talks, and lead interactive art events, contributing to vibrant local and international art scenes. And you're an advocate for artistic freedom. You gain national attention for legal and political activism, defending the display of controversial artwork, emphasizing First Amendment rights, which
Amen.
is that's a that's a battle to take on that few are willing to do. Um,
Yes, yeah, that's a large part of the story, Rich. It definitely is.
yeah. So I always start off with just my only scripted question, and that is, where were you born, and what was life like as a kid for Raven, Julian?
I was born in Richmond upon Thames in London, England. And at the age of 2, my parents moved to southern Spain. They had gone on vacation. They had driven down through France and through Spain to Portugal. And at that time, in the early 70s, it was actually 1972, Spain and Portugal were pristine Mediterranean paradises. They were just exquisite. I mean, it's beautiful now, but it's very, very different. It's very touristy and very overbuilt in many places. Some places still primitive. It's amazing. So they drove down. They drove through this town called Marbella, and they fell in love. And my mother was sort of saying, "I love this place. Maybe we should live here. Could we live here?" And my dad was an entrepreneur, and he um, at the time, the fax machine had just been invented, and he was devising a way that he could run his business from the golf course in Spain, drink gin and tonics, and send faxes back and forth to London. And he did. And he
Right.
managed to do that until he passed, sadly, at a young age, which may have been the result of that. I don't know. But that was it. So I grew up in this, very idyllic place. Southern Spain in the 70s was, like I said, a Mediterranean paradise.
Yeah.
The Spanish culture is beautiful. The people are beautiful. The food is amazing. The wine's amazing. The sunlight, as for an artist, the sunlight is spectacular. I don't know what it is or why it is. With that latitude, that it's even Portugal. It's all that southern band right the way across to the Portugal, even to Lisbon. That I was in Lisbon last year, and the light, it it makes you stop and say, "Wow, what it's like." It seems artificial in the sense that it's so beautiful. It's so different. The quality of it, the tone of it, it's remarkable, and it's known for that. And when you go there, you really see that, and you're like, "Wow, it's beautiful." So, growing up in Marbella was to me as a creative kid. I was a seeker. I was always taking stuff apart, dismantling and investigating how things work. A nature lover. I was always out in nature. I was always turning over rocks and filling my pockets with creatures. My mother used to tell me little anecdotal stories. I'd come back as a boy from being in the woods all day and sit on the couch, and she'd literally see bugs and creepy crawlers crawling out of my pockets onto the sofa. So if it wasn't that, I was then with a mask and snorkel under the sea, fishing and exploring and, spear diving and that. So it was a really beautiful, I did have a very blessed and privileged childhood in that sense. Not well, my parents were not wealthy, in the sense of wealth, but they were not, it was, a middle class upbringing. But in Spain, that was wealthy
Right.
because of the difference of the average. Spain at that time was still very poor. And so if you were middle class, you were wealthy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Was your mom a stay-home mom, or did she work as well?
No, she was a stay-home mom. Yeah, she had three boys, and she had her hands full with three mischievous little boys. So that's what she did. And in Spain, there was no working at that time. There was no foreigners didn't work, couldn't work in Spain. It was just Spain in the 70s, fresh out of the dictatorship under Franco. It was still we moved to Spain when Franco was still in power.
Okay.
So we moved to Spain as a very safe. London at the time was experiencing a little spike in crime, and it was, I think, one of the motivators was they wanted to raise their kids in a safer environment. And Spain under Franco, with his iron fist, unfortunately, but it was a very safe place. It was the type of place you could drop your wallet and return an hour later, and it'd still be in the same place.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of picture of what it was like, and then the transition after he died. But for foreigners living down there, it was very, very difficult. It was so difficult that if you wanted to open a business at that time as a foreigner in Spain, and this is another good picture, the government forced you to have a Spanish partner who owned 51% of the business.
Oh, wow.
So you want to own a business? There it is. You have to have a Spanish partner. He's got to own 51%.
Holy cow.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. Spain has been a very oppressed people, sadly, but it's produced a very beautiful culture, and that's the interesting part about it.
Yes, definitely, definitely. With your brothers, were they younger, older,
One
both?
older, one younger.
Okay, so you're right in the middle.
Yep.
Gotcha, gotcha. How was school for you growing up? Was it a scenario where you were interested in uh, kind of fitting in, or were you a little bit off to the side, kind of just observing, wanted to stay to yourself?
Yeah, that's maybe the better description. That's the latter part of what you said. I always, you want to try to fit in, but it's just life is, you just walk a sort of peculiar way. You're just as a happy-go-lucky kid, if that's the case, you're sort of unaware a lot of the time, but then you realize, oh yeah, no, I was, off to one side a lot of the time by myself as an observer, because I think that's part of the artistic gift.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's a good description. And I went to very, very small schools in southern Spain. There were English international schools with like an English curriculum.
Okay.
The parents of foreigners, I mean, the parents, like my parents, they all got together. All the foreigners would get together down there and say, well, we want to live here, we need a school for our kids. And then they'd band together and they'd start a school in a caravan, and there'd be like 4 kids in there. So wasn't homeschooling at that time, but they were very small. So
Yeah.
that's, they were good though. School for me again was a good experience because it didn't have the scale to be, I think, of a lot of the madness that comes into schooling when you have these huge schools that kids really get lost. You got few
Yeah.
kids in a class and a teacher, and so it was much more personal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was about to ask. Was it very personable in terms of the education component? And I think that's always highly beneficial for the student
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
when they're able to experience that. There's a little bit more hands-on ability at that point for the teacher, and they're able to see and notice some of the attributes of the student that a lot of times get overlooked when they're in a larger school
that's
setting.
true. Yeah, that's true. And that plays into my story a little bit as well. That's true. Yep. As an
Okay,
artist, that was one of my experiences.
got you. You said you were out and about exploring. all of those kinds of things in the woods, in the ocean. Um, was that a form of escape for you, or was it a form of just curiosity?
Yeah, curiosity. I was fascinated, always have been, still am, just in awe of what I saw, and you just drawn to it. My mother couldn't keep me in. That
Yeah,
was, I was gone old. And that again about the safety of Spain, it was a different world and a different time. As a boy, I was gone all day by myself. I'd
yeah,
play with my brothers, I'd hang out, obviously, would ride bicycles here and there. But when I was just in my mode, I would be gone, and there was nothing to stop you because there's unending piles of unturned rocks everywhere you go, or the beach or the sea. It's unending. So your ability to explore and just again trying to fathom stuff out, see creatures and catch creatures and look at them and observe them, and then later on, my that sort of was part of my artistic development where I began to draw and sketch things that I found interesting. That's my memories going back to when I was very young, probably before my father died at the age of 9. So I was 9, so it
okay,
was probably 7, 8 years old. I have recollections of sitting on his knee sketching bougainvillea flowers, beautiful flowers. That Spain has some really magnificent wildflowers, and creatures and sea creatures, drawing those and creating like sketchbooks with little, with drawings of the diddle. My dog's here. Why don't you just lay down? Drawing the different, you know, creatures that I was fascinated with at the time. So yeah, learning, just a voracious learner in that sense.
okay. With um, being at that age and leaving London, were you able to experience very much your grandparents in
No,
your life at that point in
nope,
time? No, none. Okay.
not at all.
And
I might have met them once by recollection.
oh, really? Okay. So they were completely removed when you guys had transferred over to Spain.
Yeah, my father's parents were already passed. My
Okay.
He was 20 years older than my mother. My mother's father had passed. I met my grandmother, and I have a very vague remembrance or recollection of that in Spain. She came out to visit, and that's
Okay.
really it.
Gotcha. Was there any other relatives within the family that had that creative uh, gift at all?
Yeah, my mother's father. He
Okay.
was an artist. He was a painter, but he in England in those obviously 40, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Not, I mean, I suppose it's the same today. Being an artist is just a difficult direction. So he was an engineer, which is also part of what I've been doing in my woodworking and cabinetry and design and all that type of the engineering side. But
Okay.
he was a painter, and at night he'd come home from working a full day as an engineer, and he'd go to art school and he'd learn to paint. And one of the funny anecdotes from his life, my mother would say, in very sort of traditional England, would be him coming, and they didn't. He wasn't painting from live models. They had like nude busts, and so he painted these large paintings. She said, and he was schlepping it back and forth on the bus, on the double decker London
Right.
bus, with the large nude torso, and it was really quite a scandal in those days. And the other picture was, she said she'd come home and he'd be sitting behind. He was also very he must have been the introvert like myself, a highly introverted. He would be sitting behind art books when she came home. He'd be like buried and would look over the top and sort of say hello and then go back behind his book. So that was the grandfather on his side. My father's side, he was more the businessman and the entrepreneur. So
Okay.
that's the sort of where I got the business side from as well.
Gotcha. That's very interesting that flowed down in that direction, and also too that he was introverted.
Yeah.
Um, I find many creatives, including myself, highly introverted. Prefer to just sit back, watch, observe, not too much interested in being up front and getting attention or anything like
Yeah.
that. When your dad passed away at 9, you mentioned, Was that a turning point in your personal life in terms of what you knew before and what was going to come after?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Shocking. Shocking. And I think a lot of that had to do with my parents' very shallow, both of them, my father Jewish, my mother Gentile, very shallow concept of God or faith. They really didn't have any other than traditional celebrations. It was sort of a Jewish Christian home, but it
Okay.
was like Christmas, or my father was very, very nominal. It was like basic Jewish traditions, nothing. And the Christian part dominated more as far as Christmas and Easter and those different things. But so I didn't have faith as a child other than what, you were being told sort of indirectly from your parents. So when my father died, he was actually in England at the time. He'd been gone for like 3 months because Spain hadn't worked out the way he wanted economically, and he was looking for opportunities in Hong Kong, and we had moved to Portugal to stay with my mother's brother who lived in Portugal whilst my father tried to build a bridge to Hong Kong. Sadly, he passed, but he was gone for months and then died and was gone out of our life. And we were living in Portugal, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And because he was on the side of his parents, on the Jewish side of the family, they bury you within 2 or 3 days. You're done, you're
Right.
gone. And so they couldn't find us. They couldn't find us for weeks. They
Oh,
could,
wow.
yeah. So we were in the middle of the Portugal. We'd moved in this transitionary time. That back then technology you're talking about, it was, so Portugal was 15 years, 20 years more primitive than Spain. It was like really, it was completely another world. So getting a phone call or anything, or any back then, it was either what did they used to send, telegrams, it was like
Yeah,
it was
telegram or mail.
beep 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 beep, just a little more advanced than that.
Yeah.
So we were weeks, maybe 2 or 3, without knowing, and then the news came, and it was such a shock. Because you're like, I didn't know how to process it. So it was a tailspin moment for me. I from then onwards, in my little ignorant brain, I concluded that there was no God. It was just no one could answer my questions, because as a curious person, I had a lot of questions, and
Sure.
everybody was like go and put him in a room somewhere, that type of thing, because I was constantly demanding answers, and didn't get any. And that frustration, plus then the deep wound of the death, or the absence, the disappearance of your father. Half the time I didn't even believe I just believed it. I thought he'd run off with another woman or something. I had no idea, because you didn't see the death, you didn't see the
Right.
tomb,
Right.
you didn't see the grave, you didn't see the coffin, you didn't see, you didn't, you were, he was died and buried before we knew.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was major trauma, and that did affect my life for years, and it led me on a journey as a hurt, very wounded, angry atheist. I became
Okay.
that I walked through all my teen years like that.
Right. With being in Portugal, and I'm assuming having to switch schooling structures as well, did you find that schooling became more difficult after that experience as well for you?
I think it became difficult because I had a lot more conflict.
Yeah.
In Portugal at that time, and whether it was I can't remember if it was pre my father's death or not, or it was during the time that we were waiting for him. I had real growth as an artist. I was very young. Obviously, it was like probably 8 at the time, and between the 8th and the ninth year.
Yeah.
And I can remember there was this little Portuguese kid that I became friends with. It was an English speaking school, but he was a Portuguese kid in the school. I think his name was Pedro. And he was a very good, very talented illustrator, and was drawing these amazing cartoons. And he would copy a lot of the Disney cartoons. And I was never having, I never had, my father was never interested, obviously, in me pursuing art. So he was not artistic. So he was never encouraging art. My mother was just being a mother. And so I never had artistic direction other than what was coming from the inside. And Yet when I met this kid, I became friends with him and would hang out. This kid encouraged me. I started like imitating his sketches and his drawings of Donald Duck. I can remember, and I, he was very good. What I can remember for the age, I was just
Yeah.
learning. I didn't know what to do, but I started developing as an artist. And the interesting story there was an art competition at the school I was at, this English school in it's a town called, well, it's not even a town, it's like an urbanization called Valdelobo. It's in Faro, near Faro in the southern Portugal, very beautiful place again. And it was an art competition at the school. And I can't remember what I did, but I entered some drawing or painting that I did, a little something, and I won the competition. And this
Oh wow.
friend of mine was so mad because he was much better than I was, as an illustrator, and he stopped being my friend. And I can remember that being,
Oh no.
that was the sort of, that was that's my art memory from them. But then going back to Spain after my father died, um, I think the one experience that we went to a new school that had opened up that I had real conflict with when they tried to have put me through religious instruction. There were
Okay.
Spain, even though it was an English school, there were a lot of Spanish kids in the English school in Spain, and their parents wanted Catholic,
Right.
instruction, catechism, or something, and they had a priest come in, and I rebelled, and I was maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. I was very young, and I said, "There's no way you're putting me in a class with this." I mean, I can remember the seething rage that I had because I had developed this hostility at anything that represented religion because of this atheism that I had developed. And that was, when that, did it affect me? Yeah, I mean, I can't. It, being fatherless as a young boy, a girl, the same.
Yeah.
It's just void. It's a massive void, and as you see, a lot of people go really off the deep end. And I
Hmm.
was I was pushing that. I was pushing that in many many ways and many times in my life because there was no longer a father who would set you straight. And
Right. Right.
you
And
do. Yep.
go ahead.
No, I said you sort of fall out the bucket.
Yeah.
You just go nuts.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. How was it for your mother at this point as well? Having three boys and not having that income at that point in time. Did she take up work and was she gone a lot away from you guys?
No, my father, being a businessman, running his businesses in England, he had properties that he'd bought. He had some a little row of tiny apartments that he had managed to buy at some point that had tenants in them, and he had bought at some point in time it was a factory of sorts. I'm not sure even what it produced, but it provided an income. And so when he died and it was all taken care of, there was a trust set up, and he provided for his wife and children. And again, the reason why we were able to live is because Spain was so cheap in comparison
Yeah.
with England. So the English pound went a long way in Spain.
Right.
And that allowed my mother then to be, again, still full time wrestling in a foreign culture with, being single now. She was a widow with three young and boisterous boys that we were.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were.
Well, that was a blessing, um,
Yeah, oh yeah.
for sure. That his business acumen had allowed him to kind of establish that for you guys. Um,
It allowed us to stay there because if not, there was no way she would have been able to stay. Because, like I said, working in Spain was just a hurdle for a foreigner anyway. So
yeah.
working in Spain, paying private tuition because the schools are private, having to come up with that and the rent or whatever it was each month, not gonna happen. And it was very. We went through many many years of instability because the nature of the rental scene in these tourist spots, which is like Marbella, is that people will not rent to you more than 3 months of the year. It's different now, but back then No one will, because they want to rent to you 3 months and then, sometimes maybe 6 months if you get in right after the summer, but they want the peak rents that they
Right.
get during the peak months, which are summer months or Christmas time, or there are these high tourist seasons. So we were constantly moving. I mean, we counted at one point in about a decade, we moved 36 times.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah. And that was because you would literally be in a place for 3 months and then have to move, or maybe 6 months, and we could not be stable. That was, as a young boy, I was like, it's just an adventure. It's like a different place to explore. I can't,
Yeah.
it didn't affect me other than that. And it made me have more flexibility in my adult life that I was freer to travel and be
Yeah.
exploring. But, so I didn't see it as anything other than, yeah, there was no real community down there. It was very fractured because foreigners lived spread out all over the place. You just had family and you go to school. But again, for me, I was happy because I could explore. So
Right. Right.
it wasn't an issue.
Did you see it affect your brothers in the same way as well as it did you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not as it did me. I think different. Obviously, we're all different how we process it. The
Yeah.
faith component, which just wasn't present. They were not interested. They didn't care about those things, and they still don't.
Okay.
Um, then that their life choices and what they ended up doing, they all went off the deep end like I did in that sense. I think a little earlier on, my older brother, he did as well. He was, so since I was more curious about things that they were not interested in. They were much more social, much more extrovert, completely, and people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
friends and friend groups and all those things. They gravitated towards that wherever that was. So it made it hard when we were moving, if it was out of the area or a new school. We oscillated between these two or three schools. So that could have been different. But for me, I was like in my own little world. And so you just keep on, and it never was a problem going somewhere new. It was always exciting to me.
Gotcha. With being back in Spain and being in this new um, structured uh, religious setting with school, um, did you find yourself less um, interested as well in the education component of it? And were the students and or the teachers were they more domineering than what you had experienced prior?
Well, the school had they had this priest come in and teach like a religious class. It wasn't a religious school. It was,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
So it was like the parents of the Spanish kids, because Catholics they're very Catholic in Spain.
Yeah,
They wanted to have something for because their kids were not in the Spanish system that had the Catholic, teaching. So
yeah,
it was one. So that was because this school was an international school, international students and teachers, and so they were foreign, in that sense. So you know, as far as my experience with teachers in general, I mean, that's one school was a school where I had this conflict with this one teacher that I in when I was there just last year, I went and sought him out. I found him and I went and apologized to him
okay,
because I couldn't remember the reason, but I knew that I had this, and I think it was the conflict that led us to actually leave that school because I'm very, if I get stuck on something like this guy, and this is really a problem at the school. He's trying, and I think he was just trying to not be a father to me, but he was trying to obviously push me in the right way. And at
yeah,
that time, I was like, just this is just who and what in the world, and I was just rebelling. So I did. I found him out just like last year, and I said, "Listen, I don't know what it was, but I was a very wounded child at that time, and no one, gave me answers. And I think I was pretty mad at you. I was, for sure, I was. So, but yeah, in general, the life in Spain, the lifestyle, and even of the teachers, it's a special place. They're people that they're just, you know, I have very few negative memories from schooling because it Marbella is a special place. It's really people that go there. they sort of have the same mindset. They're not these, you know, institutional teachers that you'll find in a city or something that have just, you know, and you can have, obviously my wife's a teacher, you have amazing teachers everywhere, but you can have some that are very rigid or institutional. These people had remarkable impact on my life. Um, and Spain contributed to that. And that the next school that I went to after leaving that school, I think because of the conflict with this teacher, is where I met two other teachers who profoundly impacted my life, especially in the arts. That was just life changing. And so they were really, it there's some good people down there, and this is not a religious thing, and these people are spiritual, and they were just people that really wanted to do good to their students. It was a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go there with those teachers. Um, the encouragement that you got from that. Did they recognize your abilities rather quickly?
No, because I was very confused. I
Okay.
was not pursuing art. I didn't, I did wherever it was. If there was something, I would gravitate towards it, but I had no inclination. I was just I was just
Okay. Right.
static.
Right.
So I was, I can't, at the time when the moment really happened for me in this new school, and the professor, he's still alive today. Met with him too last year in Spain, which was great because he was had such a powerful impact on my life. But he was the math professor, but also he was a musician, a great guitarist, a wonderful, passionate guy, very creative math teacher who I sucked at math my whole life. I could not add. I had numbers in me. I can do color and shapes and lines, but numbers just like, forget it. Well, he was the only person that helped me understand math enough that I passed the critical exam when I needed to pass it. So I was amazed. That was amazing. And because of this guy, so he was really special. And one day I was in the library, and I can remember, I don't know what I was doing, but I was doodling. I wasn't doing, he said that he told me just recently, like what I was like in class. He said I was just always distracted. I was always thinking, I was always somewhere else. I had terrible grades. I was a terrible student. I couldn't focus. Nothing excited me, so I just didn't want to do it. And math was horrible, so I just struggled. I just copied homework from someone else from my physics, and I love physics and I love chemistry, but I hated the math and chemistry and all this. I couldn't. I wanted just to make experiments and dissect animals, and then they was like, and I couldn't do it. I just was bombing. Consistent. It was terrible. It was you name it. It was really bad.
Yeah.
But and it was all compounded by my internal state, and that was all very evident to me. But the math teacher was in the library, and I was doodling, sitting there. I wasn't messing around, but I wasn't doing anything productive. But I'm just doodling on my desk.
Right.
And he was watching me without me knowing, and then he turned up with a crushed Coke can, and he put it down in front of me, and he said, "Draw that." And I drew it. And he then basically took me by the hand, and he walked me over to the art department, and he introduced me to an artist, an American artist by the name of David Bodlak, who became the most influential person, I think, in my life for the next, I don't know how many years. This guy he was just they were great people. Anyway, the math teacher was super cool. I mean, these guys were really cool. They were good people. They wanted to help their students. They loved teaching. And, and it was a shame because, there were a lot of idiots at the time, I can remember as well, that were causing all these problems. And I was always on the fence, whether I was with it or not. I was by myself, but sometimes I was getting drawn into the stupidity. And these people were really sold out, wanting to see their students do well. They really did. And I mean, that just shows with me passing the math. It was impossible. I'd failed my entire life in it. This guy helped me. It was amazing. So the art teacher was another person, and he was a professional artist, but obviously couldn't make it enough. So he had to work as a teacher, an art teacher. Right. And he was the best. David Bodlak was the best. He was the type of man from California who he could, in a class of 10 or 15 students, that were, not, some had talent and some were just like in class because it was part of the curriculum. He would always find something redemptive in everybody's work. He would always could encourage. He always could help them and always critique, but always teach and encourage. And that was such a lesson to me. He introduced me to the portrait painter Robert Henri, the American painter, and the book he wrote called The Art Spirit. And that book was transformational for my life as well. And very few people had given me books. I wasn't a huge reader of books. I was more a reader of research and a researcher, researching books. If I did anything, it was like encyclopedias and that type of thing. But this was a book, and it was just changed my life as an artist. It was just absolutely marvelous. So from those folks are the folks that really encouraged me. And then that's where I had my first solo show at the school. And I thought oh man, look at me. I'm doing all this art stuff. It was pretty cool. And then before long, I was focusing on trying to get into the Chelsea School of Art in London, England, which is a very prestigious art school.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to the top art school. And, and I got rejected, continually trying to get in there.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow. Did that encouragement that you got from both of those teachers, did that subside some of the inner turmoil that you were experiencing as a kid at that point?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, there was a good time of create because the art will do that. Now I know myself because I've seen it, used it, and employed it in other people's lives for that reason.
Yeah.
Art is medicine. And when you're in a creative mode, if you can be snatched out of that destructive whirlpool, which I was in, they really snatched me out, and they were then affirming me and they were encouraging me, and it's something I didn't have. You didn't have anybody in the arts, and these people now were like, yes, good, do that. And then you'd produce something and they were like, good, very good. This is that. And I was like, wow. I was like, I'll do more, because then you're encouraged to do more because you're getting encouraged. It's amazing. Life is a fire, and it's a fire of creativity that they ignited in me. And it absolutely dispelled that aspect, of my struggle. It was always there because you're always going to be, asking the questions. But it did for that season before I went to art school. And then art school was a whole other ball game altogether. The Chelsea School, the famous Chelsea School of Art in Chelsea, London, in the UK. Yep.
How many times did you get rejected before they allowed you in?
I had gone on a program, a pre-degree program, or tried to get into this program,
Okay.
and I got rejected. I was accepted in this preliminary drawing program because it was paid preparation to try and get into the next program, and it was a 2-year foundation course that and I'm trying to remember if there was another application because I applied to other schools, but I think that was later on. The Slade School of Art in London. They had the Royal Academies. Yeah, those are the top 3 schools. Yeah, I think the Royal Academy is the top school, or if not, it's the Slade School is the number 1 and number 2, number 3 is the Chelsea School of Art. So
Gotcha.
I had gone and applied for this 2-year foundation course, and that was a big no. And I think that I had applied, and this is what happened, is that I applied from Spain at one point, and then it was no.
Gotcha.
And then we moved back to England for a season my mother had gone back, or she'd sent me back. I can't remember the details, but I was back in London trying to get into these schools. Oh, I was back there doing that preliminary course. That's right. I was back there for like 6 weeks in the summertime before the fall, before the year would start. And so I was there present, and I can remember then going to these interviews with my mother. She was the one that really did it because whether it was that first rejection that was from Spain, then we reapplied and went to this interview and then was rejected again. And somehow my mother, she taught me a lot. This is where my mom's impact in my life, I think, was some of the strongest. Was that she was a very kind, helpful person, very kind, a servant heart. She really just wanted to see
Yeah.
people wherever she was. It was mainly her ability was to make the environment, cook and make a beautiful meal and make everyone welcome. So very
Yeah.
hospitable.
Yeah.
But her personality, I think her strongest character attribute was that she was, when she wanted to do something, or when she needed was when it was wrong with something, she was very, very bold and insistent in just pushing through and not taking no for an answer. And so I can remember her with this. So I'm there, I didn't know anything. They're like, get out of here, and I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm just you just,
Yeah.
that's life. You have no recourse. And she's like, oh no, we're not going to take no for an answer. We're going to redo this. And somehow she got she reapplied for me, and she got me this 2-year course. She managed to get me on a 1-year version of it, or the second year of it,
Okay.
somehow, that she got round the system and she got me in. And I was like, wow. And so I had gone through this course. It was my degree would end up being 4 years, and this was now the first year of that degree. And
Okay.
art school was a real challenge. Was a real challenge for me.
What was it? Did you experience it as a real challenge because of the uh, possibly the environment of what Spain was giving you in terms of a bit more freedom, a bit more connection to nature, connected to fantastic sunlight? Now you're in London, which is a bit gloomier on a regular basis, more industrialized. Was it that type of scenario, or was it actually the literal coursework that you were having to do?
Absolutely. Yep. That's a good insight there, Rich. And that's it was part of that was evident since the first day. And that's why most people who, when you move to Spain, you just never want to go back, because the lights and the bright and Spain has on average 300 blue sky days a year.
Oh wow,
Yeah. That's
wow,
and an average temperature where I grew up of 72 degrees
heaven almost.
and low humidity.
Yeah,
And so you get high humidity sometimes in the summer, and storms here and there, obviously, but
right.
average of 300 blue sky days a year is amazing. I mean, it's like it gets boring. Like, oh my goodness, it's just like it's amazing. So you going back to London, yeah, gray and dreary and rainy. And London, the people are, it's a city, and English people are a certain way. It's not Spain. I grew up in Spain, even though I'm English. I grew up in Spanish culture, and Spain
Yeah,
is vibrant and gregarious and loud and noisy and colorful, and they're just Spaniards. The Spaniards are just wonderful people. The British are not Spaniards. They're
right.
just, oh my God, it was so. And then in art school, and then coming from this wonderful Californian, encouraging art teacher who was
Yeah,
just the most, it was just heaven. Then to these British, they were not all of them. There were a couple of guys that were really good, but in general, the rest of them had an attitude, and some of them were they were vindictive. They were either failed artists who would just take the opportunity to just tear into people's work, and not mine. I mean, I would have the interactions, but I would be standing next to someone who was getting the vulture like on his
yeah,
shoulder, just like, and I wanted to punch them in the nose. And I was like, man, how could you just? I mean, they weren't just critiquing; they were like tearing people's souls out. I mean, it was that bad, and
yeah,
that environment to me, because again, me being who I am at art school, if I wasn't in the coursework that I was prescribed, which was amazing, just to answer that part of the question, I had no problem with it. I was like, give me more.
okay, gotcha.
Lunchtime, break time. If I'm doing drawing or painting here, I'm in the photo developing booth by myself over here, learning how to develop black and white photos at that time. And that's when I started getting really curious with photography.
Yeah,
And then I was in the print room and working on etchings, or working on. I think at that time it was mainly etchings, but I got into a little bit of other print formats, whether it was lino cut and those things, but mainly etching, and just the process and the facilities and these massive buildings full of materials and machines and art tools. You're like, oh, I can remember working in plaster and wax, and then as far as sculpture is concerned, they took us to the Victoria and Albert Museum. Amazing museums in the UK have all these treasures, worldwide treasures. And they're like, I can't remember the theme, but I ended up building. And I think this is when I began to really become aware of, again, a lot of hostility, but and the envy, I think, in the art world. There's a lot, there's a lot of
Yes.
ego and there's a lot of envy, and we all have to wrestle with that within ourselves. No one is exempt from that. But I was making these. We were sketching samurai, like, I don't know, 15th century samurai.
Regalia.
Oh my goodness, the armor and swords. This stuff is so meticulously made, and this is hundreds of years old, and so you're like, oh my goodness, it's just unreal what the level of craftsmanship and detail and precision. So I'm sketching, I'm doing my thing. Then I decide I'm going to build some samurai warriors in the yard. I'm going to do some sort of sculpture, and again, the 3D gifts sort of kicking in, and I built these huge giant. I'd go to this. We call it skipping. We'd go running down the street to the dump and to the trash skips and the containers, and we'd go and grab all the stuff, and I would be coming back with all this stuff. And I built these huge things. Man, I was getting so snubbed. Like, who do you think you are? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just building these things. This is what I do. And but that started provoking a lot of hostility that I got then from fellow artists. So the diversity of what the school offered was like a playground for me, and that's where I thrived. But then I also began to die there, because a lot of the environment with the students, I was totally a political naive. I grew up in Spain, swimming in the sea and fishing, and I didn't even know what politics was. Very, 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 just very sheltered in that sense. In Spain, no one talked about it. It's just like, it's not there. So I was thrust back into London, into the hard, Chelsea was very well known, very active. And the picture that really shows you how sort of disconnected I was they were all the artists with all these major protests, and they were always, and Margaret Thatcher was prime minister at the time, and they're like, well, she's this and this and this, and I didn't have a political opinion, and I think the only thing that I did knew, which I think it marked them in their mind of what I was, and I had no real view, but I knew that Margaret Thatcher had adjusted these, like, whether it was corporate tax rates or some major tax rate, because Marbella, where I grew up, was full of British people who had fled England with their money, trying to hide it in tax-free havens, whether in Gibraltar or offshore accounts, because of the tax rate. So they were in Spain living with their money out of the country because they didn't want to pay the tax rates. So it made sense to me that, hey, she's dropping the tax rates and it's incentivizing these people to take their money back to England, because they're now no longer worried about paying these really elevated rates. And, I thought that made sense. And so I would talk about, that's the only thing I knew. Oh boy, but that was not popular to say in art school, because she was the nemesis, Thatcher. And I'm like, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
That's just, so I think that became, I got marked as like this, whether I was this viewed as a Tory and again, I had no knowledge other than that. And it made good sense. But then I think what really did it was they were all marching, and they were full-scale riots going on at the time, full-scale student riots, riot police, shields, and horses in full scale. And all the Chelsea students were going to riot. Oh, we're going to riot, and they're going to do it. Are you coming with? And I'm like, no. And I'm not going. And then they went on strike. And this was the weirdest thing. And I'm like, art students were striking. And I was like, how do you strike when you're a student? And then they were protest. They did a picket outside the school. the Chelsea School of Art, they was like, no one's gonna come to school. We're gonna stand outside, and because they were all demanding government funds or whatever it was. Again, I didn't
Okay.
understand it. I didn't I,
Sure.
I didn't know about it, so I didn't get involved. And but I said, well, I came from Spain to paint, guys, so I'm just gonna come to school and paint. Oh no, we're gonna shut this down and all this. And I said, no, I said I came here to paint. I am, and so I can remember walking through a crowd of art students, my fellow art students, going to school, getting yelled at, being called a scab by these art students because I went to school to paint, and I'm like, and in school there was another Spaniard, a Spanish student. She didn't understand. She was from Spain. And she
Right.
from Spain. She would say, I'm fluent in Spanish, but she would be trying to speak English. Like she didn't get
Sure.
it. And then it was like two or three of us in the entire school, this massive school. There were like two or three of us in there because I'm like,
Wow.
you're not going to, and this is I think who I am as a person. You're not going to force me. I'm going to
Right.
do what I'm going to do, and you do what you want to do. That's fine. You're
Yeah.
free. I'm free. Don't get in my way. I won't get in yours. But let me in because I'm going to. And I did, and I had to push through this crowd, and that sort of. I think that began this sort of tension where the experience of rejection you begin to have. Whereas I grew up in a place, not that there wasn't rejection, but it was very minor because it was so small.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
you started to really feel, and then you're like, man, it's just this like no associations, and that affected my existential confusion, and I got very depressed, really depressed. I mean, I was like, man, the self portrait that I have of myself that I portrait painted, and for me it was a wonderful painting, but I am so depressed in this portrait. I didn't even realize it. I'm just painting myself, and I am just so depressed. And
Mm.
I mean, just like I look like death or going, it's just so confused. And it's amazing how the the portrait, how you manage to capture yourself in that state, but you're
Right.
totally unaware of it. You're not painting yourself. I'm depressed. I'm painting it depressed. No, I was just
Yeah.
depressed. And I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
So that was really dark for me, and I was I would be thinking about the light, the sort of scintillating, splintered sunlight in Spain, just bursting down onto these beautiful white little mountain villages and these quaint little historic towns. And I could see myself in some little studio in this town in the middle of nowhere with an old woman sweeping the streets and a little black cat in the
Yeah.
corner over there and this beautiful Spanish. And I'm like, what do I need to be here for? Well, I'm just miserable. I'm just absolutely miserable. I could be there and I could be painting my own paintings and on my own terms and not have to deal with the static. And so I left. I packed up and I walked out 7 months in.
Okay.
And I just jumped on a plane and I left. I grabbed my bag and I said goodbye. I'm gone. And I didn't even sign out. I didn't do anything. I just said goodbye and I left. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe.
For
And
sure.
and yet leaving, wanting to go back to that sort of idyllic picture never materialized because I went into my spiral then of I left school, I have no money, what am I going to do? How am I going to live? And that leads me then to the next chapter that became the destruction before the redemption. So,
Okay.
yep.
How how did your how did your mom react to that decision at that point in time? Was she
She was
seeing the
always
turmoil rise in you?
yeah, she was always very supportive of me, and I think she
Okay.
knew me. Well, no, I think she didn't. She knew me very well, and she knew that when I was determined to do something,
You're gonna do
I'm
it.
just going to do it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't. The only way out, and I didn't want to because I was thriving in the system because of the facilities. It was great, but I couldn't breathe. I couldn't, and it was that social setting. A lot of that had to do it, and then it was amplified in my existential question. Then, oh my goodness, I can't. I don't know the answers. So she was like, yeah, she was do what you got to do, basically. So my mom always supported me, and she always encouraged me. And it was, she was just a wonderful, wonderful, and I say was because she passed
Okay.
a year and a half ago. That's why I was back in Spain at the end of
Oh, man.
2023 and 24. So my greatest art encourager and supporter, um, she sadly passed. So that's, that was that was a big deal. But at those days, she was great. It was amazing to have this one person
Yeah.
who championed you, a mother's love for her children, no matter what type of basket cases we are. So they just have this amazing unconditional love that was also transformational for me, and really fuel to keep me going. That you didn't, I was on the road to despair, and
Yeah.
so she was always there as a comfort to me. But yeah, Spain on the return flight from London began my descent. my
And
descent. Yeah.
and what did that look like once you touched down in Spain?
Well, no money. You're not gonna, try to make it as an artist. I didn't even have that as a thought.
Okay.
What had happened to me in the Christmas? See, I went to school in the September of '88.
Yeah.
Started that degree. I was in Chelsea before in the summer of '88. Then I went back to the degree. So Christmas of '88, this was a major transformational time in my life, and this as well was what really compounded the darkness. Was that I went back to Marbella, Spain for Christmas, 2 weeks. It's typical. Everybody just travels back home, and my elder brother and I, we would go out to a bar that he would frequent more than me, but because he was there, but I'd go and I knew these people, and we'd start going out, and the bar owner was a friend of my brother's, and he would work basically for nothing but for drinks. And so
Okay.
the guy he'd get basically a show with my brother and I. It ended up we were really good behind the bar. We would DJ for him and
Oh, nice.
and
Okay.
rock around. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and we'd get free. He didn't have any money. We'd get free drinks, and
Right.
so but we got some real experience as running a bar together.
Yeah.
So when I went back to school, not an it was just a bar experience, etc. But that Christmas, specifically New Year's Christmas Eve, 1998, we got a call from my mother in the evening. My mother was very English, very spoke the Queen's English. She's like, "Boys, my boys, would you come to church with me tonight?" My mother was. She never went. She would. This is once a year. She'd go to a Catholic midnight mass on Christmas Eve, which is
Uh-huh.
a big deal in Spain. Their religion, their festivals, and their religious festivals is like they go all out. And so
Yeah.
my brother, it's Christmas Eve. We'd already been drinking. We were already out partying at 7 in the evening, and this is going to go on all night for us till the next day. And she says, come. Will you come and join me? So it's like, Mom, of course. She's by herself. She's the widow. She's going to go to church. We had all these girls with us, and three brothers, and all this. We were all larking about and been drinking. And we go to this church. It's really busy, a big church, Spanish Catholic church, full of people, probably 400 or 500 people there. And the priest comes up to our little group of foreigners, and in Spanish he says, "I need somebody to read from the Bible in English." And for whatever reason, my family, mainly my brothers and whoever there was there with them, they turned to me and they're like, "Jules, you read from the Bible!" Ha 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 ha! This was hysterical for them. And the
Yeah.
priest puts his hand on my shoulder, and he hands it, and we're drinking. I mean, I'm swaying. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought this is just funny. This is hysterical. What's going on? So he puts his hand on my shoulder and he gives me this Bible and he hands it to me and he shows me where I'm going to read. And we go and sit down in the church, and they're all singing their Catholic hymns. And my brothers and I, at first it was hysterical. It was laughter. They're laughing at me. They think this is the funniest thing that's going to happen. And the good news that night. I was well dressed. At least I was properly dressed. Meaning I had a suit and tie on,
Okay.
so I looked good. And I was there, and they're laughing. And then I have this sort of strange experience where I sober up. I get this real
Oh.
serious demeanor come over me, and I sober up, and I'm like, and they're laughing, and I'm getting very, very serious. This is like, oh my goodness. And I have no religious background at all, other than what
Right.
I told you, no
Yeah.
no schooling, nothing. No,
Yeah.
I think it might have been the first time I'd ever been to a service in my life. That was, I don't think I ever could before then that I can remember a religious of any kind. And I go up and I read, and I can't remember what I read. And then that night we are out in this bar. We go to the bar, and there's this big ruckus going on. Big fight happens. Big fight, and it's always fights, but this was a big fight. It's like, so you knew it was a big fight when the crowd of people moved. It wasn't just a couple of people. It was like the
Right.
whole
Right.
crowd would go one way and go back the other way, and it was like a big ruckus going on. And then, sure enough, the police came, and the police are in there, and it's like I couldn't even see it. I'm behind the bar, and I just see bodies, and it's like
Right.
ruckus. And so suddenly a guy pops up at the bar, and he's sitting there, and he's all sweating and disheveled. He's like this, and I start mocking him. I'm like, dude, it's like it's Christmas Eve. I mean, can't you just like enjoy us? Have a nice time. And he got really offended. I'm trying to hand him some serviettes to wipe his face, and he punches me, just smacks me right across the bar, and I punch him right back, knock him off his stool. I just had this instant, and whacked him right back, and the police grab him, and they drag him off. And I thought, that's it. Okay, so it's about 5 in the morning. The bars in Spain at that time would close at about 5 in the morning, and then you'd go to the discotheque afterwards, and then
Okay.
you'd be out to the sunrise, and you go have breakfast, and you go home to bed. And that's the type of that's
Yeah.
Spain. And so 5 in the morning, we're mopping, cleaning up the bar before we would go out to the discotheque, and no one around. Everybody left. The car park was empty, and I see a police car drive in, lights on, and it comes right by the front of the bar, and it pulls up right in front. And we're like, oh, wonder what they want. And they come in. They're looking around. There's 4 people in there. Me, my brother, the owner of the bar, and a girl. And
Yeah.
they see me, and they're like this. And I'm like, uh-oh. And in Spain at that time, it's a little better now, but at that time, Spain is a very corrupt nation. And
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think it's nearly as corrupt as South America, but it's corrupt. It's super corrupt. And the law enforcement is super corrupt. And you never want to have a brush with the law in Spain. You just don't. They're bad news. And so this is happening, and I'm like, uh-oh. And they take me out to the car, and there's 3 of them. And before I knew what was going on, I can't remember what was said. They start beating me. They just bang, bang, and I look over to my brother. He's standing in the door of the bar, and I'm like, "You better run and get my passport," because I'm thinking I'm going to end up floating in the sea, and that's
Right.
the type of thing you can just disappear. At that time, they could do something, you could die, and that's it. So I'm terrified, and they're beating the life out of me. They stuff me in this car. They drive me. I'm in the back seat between 2 policemen. Oh no, I'm in the back seat with 1 policeman, and the 2 are in the front. And the guy in the front's reaching over, and he's beating on me. I'm beaten, and I'm just getting beat, full beat, all the way to the police station, which was I think it's about 1,300-year-old castle in Spain, ancient building, the main castle of Marbella. Every town has like a main castle, which was the city where the town was built about. And the police station was in there, and it was like a dungeon. They took me down to the cellar. I mean, it's really just, I remember the echo of the nightsticks bouncing off my back
Oh, wow.
in this stone corridor into the dungeon. I mean, it was dark and scary, and I'm getting beat, and I'm just on adrenaline, so I don't know what's going on. I just couldn't believe what was happening. Like, you heard the noise before you felt the sting, because it just,
Yeah.
you're wired. And
Yeah.
I don't know how many hours I was there for, but they put me in a corner. They didn't process me, or Spain is just, it's not like this. And by 9 o'clock in the morning, I was sort of drooling in a corner somewhere. Like, I thought I was losing my mind, because I'm like, what did I do? I thought they might have been taking me to the station because I punched that guy or something. Maybe he pressed charges. I have no idea.
Right.
They didn't say anything. The police that brought me in just dropped me and left. And then it's as if the guy behind the counter realized, there's nothing here. And they took me and they basically threw me on the streets. They just turfed me outside. My brother came and picked me up, and that was it. You just glad you didn't die, and
Sure.
you got in the car and got out of there. But I woke up at some girl's house that same day, probably like midday, a few hours later, on a couch, seething with rage. And I was an atheist before, but now I woke up and the first words off my lips were, "There is no God." And I was full of rage. And that was the beginning of the spiral, because that was the Christmas of '88. I came back to Spain after leaving art school like February of '89. And then not having an income, I ended up building a bar with my brothers, our own bar, because it was the only way to make money in Spain is tourism, and there's no industry down there other than that.
Right.
Sun, wine, and drinks, and that's really where everybody can try and make a living. And we did. But obviously, in my condition, having access to a bar and all the drugs that would come was just the beginning of the end for me. And so I went through a lot of success as a bar owner, as a young man. I had a lot of success very quickly. I was still just turned 19 years old.
Yeah.
Uh, and we opened the doors, and my brothers, they basically, my elder brother fled. He couldn't stand being there because it was a new bar. Nobody went there. All of his friends went to where it was cool to go. No one would go to the new bar because it wasn't cool yet. So it
Right.
took the entrepreneur to basically, suck it up for the next 2 years whilst it got legs. And it did. And it became the most successful bar. It's still there today. 35 years later, it's still there. My,
Wow.
my younger brother has been running it. And, but
Okay.
that was the place, and then of great darkness and deprivation and depravity, and just I was wanting to take my life. By the time I was 22, which was 1992, I was suicidal to the point of actively driving my motorcycle at 160 miles an hour. I couldn't care less if I just became a road pizza. And I then had a mountaintop epiphany and experience, contemplating nature, and God revealed himself to me as the designer, as the great artist, the great designer and creator of all. And my life was changed forever. And that leads me to a whole other chapter, but that's a remarkable intervention. And it was spectacular. It was absolutely spectacular. And my life was, like I said, radically transformed from the inside out forever.
Right.
That led me on a whole new journey. And I left the bar and left all the whole life, everything. And I went and pursued my calling in the sense of my spiritual journey.
Okay. When you decided you were going to do the bar with your brother, had you put art aside during that time as well, or were you still had some inklings of creativity going through you?
Yeah, absolutely. The bar that we were working at, which was his friend's bar, I had painted a giant mural in there of New York City. And
Okay.
at that time, it was like black lights, I think, had just come out, and these bulbs. So I did it with all this sort of fluorescent paint. It was
Right.
really
Yeah.
cool. It was for that
Yeah.
time, it was really cool. So I was in that. And then the building of the bar, the sort of the synergy of my entrepreneurial and creative gifts came together, because I'm working with my hands. I did most of the work, most of the innovation, all the things that, our uncle was involved giving us, he had the tools and he'd give us direction, but then he'd leave us to it and go sit in the bar all day by himself. And he said, "I'm going to just sit over here and look at the gorgeous woman all day." And he just did, that's what he did. And we were there just working it out, young boys with the tools, and we did. And we built it. And so my creative gifts, they kicked in. So to me, it was art. It was everything that I was doing, laying bricks or learning, it was learning as much as experimenting, and then doing, things that we'd never done before.
Yeah.
But our life depended on it. We had no money. My mother had managed to secure a loan to start this business, to rent the property. And we had no option. We had no money. We didn't have a penny in our pockets. So this was all, here's the business, here's some tools, here's some material. You guys have got to make this happen. And my mother would ran around and helped us with the paperwork, thank God, because she was really able to do that, which she did. And that relieved a lot of the anxiety because of the again, the bureaucracy in Spain is just insane.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
again for a foreigner open a business. It wasn't like it was in the 70s where you needed the partner. You could open your own business, which we did. Things
Okay.
changed quite a bit by then. This was 1992.
Yeah.
But just the journey of all the hurdles is very unusual because it is so difficult, regardless of the you know um, those prohibitions in the past. Today, the Spain is like a master of bureaucracy. The country is so crippled. It's so crippled by the most discouraging and prohibitive bureaucracy for business. It's not even funny to be self-employed. And as an artist, I was the last year and a half in Spain. You have to pay to be self-employed about $350 a month
Oh,
just to
wow.
be self-employed. So you have to pay like a tax to
Right.
the government because
Yeah.
you're self-employed, as if to say, we're going to pay you for what you may not get from us because we're not working for some company that you're able to really get us in the garnishing of our wages for it's unbelievable. I mean, you're talking about it's a as far as a political system, Spain it's under a socialist government now. It's always ebbed and flowed, obviously, like most countries, but it's got just a punitive business system that makes it, what it does is it just creates the corruption because then everybody goes under the table, and
Yeah.
there's this double system. Everybody runs a double system there. They've got this sort of facade of legality that they're doing the minimum to abide, and then they have this whole other life. It just breeds corruption. The oppressive regulation just breeds corruption. So
Yeah.
my mother took care of that for us, which was great. We had this business going, and it just became for me basically the tool that I would try to accomplish my own demise through, because I could drink all that I wanted to and roll out of the bar at night, which I did, and
Yeah.
it became my profession to do that. And then the existential questions remained unanswered. The wounds were still there, just festering. And
Yeah.
the only solution that I saw was then to just consider taking my life, because I thought why I came to had this remarkable conversion is I would end up always by myself in nature. I'd be sitting on the mountain. I'd be out at night on the beach, staring up at the stars. I'd be looking at just nature, and I'm saying, it's so amazing, it's so beautiful. I'll be just totally enraptured with awe at nature. And then look at my life. It's such misery and it's so painful. And all those people are, they don't care. And it's so gross. It's just, I couldn't understand the disconnect. And then I'd sit up there by myself, and then you're meditating. And so all of this exposure to nature's just speaking to me like this magnificence and this beauty and the light of the moon, full moon, the dark night bouncing and dancing on the surface of the sea. And you're sitting there, you're just like, it's spellbinding. And I was always in great confusion because it didn't make sense that nature could be so beautiful, but
Right.
humanity was so wicked and just so
Yeah.
ugly, and they wanted to do such ugly things. I used to stand up with my brother. Our friends would be gathered, everyone was getting high, and we were smoking, and we are doing all this stuff, and we're sitting there, and I'd stand up and I'd be like, there's got to be more to life than this. I mean, life can't be this cycle of never-ending drunkenness and then hungover and then getting stoned all day and then drunk and hungover and stoned. And this is what we did. And I said,
Yeah.
this is just garbage. There's got to be more to life than this. And they'd be like, shut up, Jules. It's like I was just eat and drink, for tomorrow we are to die. It was like that was the mindset.
Yeah.
And yet my pursuit to unfathom or like I say, fathom the inconsistencies. Say, this is doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's got to be an answer. And nature was the only thing that made sense to me because it was true. It didn't
Yes.
shift. It was there. It was consistent. It was always there. And the
Yeah.
sun rose and the sunset, and it was magnificent. And the mountains and the sea and the fish and the birds and the trees and the everything was spectacular. Even the human body,
Yeah.
and everything else was the reverse. So that was the witness that God was using, who would eventually reveal himself on the mountain as the great artist, the great designer of all things. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I'm an artist. You create stuff. It's like my little puny efforts. Well, look at this great work. And I was
Right.
contemplating an acorn at the time on a little bush on a mountain. And I was like in awe of
Okay.
this thing. And that's when I had this epiphany. So yeah, life changing.
So, what's fascinating to me through your story so far is the the contrasts that you've experienced. Um, Being born in England, going to Spain, having most of your childhood in Spain, realizing the um, joy and freedom that you're experiencing out in nature, in the woods, in the sea, different things like that, to where you're able to kind of be one with that natural environment. And then the contrasts of having to go into these other situations. Um, and it kind of takes me back to the teachers that were able to kind of change some trajectory of your mindset.
Absolutely.
Um, and as you were talking about them earlier, what was going through my head was those were God winks that you were getting at that point in time that you needed. You needed that encouragement. You needed someone to believe in you for you to continue on.
Absolutely.
And then you're back in England, industrialized, structured, hardened uh, teachers for whatever reason, whether it's their own um, failure in art or their inadequacies that they're experiencing as teachers of art, and the hardship there, and you realize, no, I can't stay in this. I can't. This isn't me. This is not the environment I want to be in, as well as the political unrest that you're experiencing as well. And I thought that was fascinating that the students were saying that they were going to strike, which you don't usually hear the word strike from a student. You hear that from a worker, somebody who's in a job. So that was very fascinating. Back to Spain again, in an environment that is was kind of warm for you, but yet this inner turmoil is still festering and continuing to bubble and expand within you. And then you get to this place of real darkness. Although all the while the creativity is still there, the ability to create, to be able to structure and uh, form a place of work, a place of earning that you're able to create with your brothers. That's still there. That internal creativity, that gift that you were given as a child, is still there. But yet the mind is becoming more and more dark, and it's evolving into um, this desire to be no longer in existence.
Mhm.
Do not want to be here any longer. I'm fed up with this. And you said that you experienced a profound transformation and realization of the creator of all. Are you able to describe for the audience what that moment in time felt like and looked like for you?
I will do my best because it's, something that is,
Profound.
you know, it's obviously at the time it was completely foreign. I was an atheist. The idea of
Yes.
God to me was I had discounted years ago. There was just no way. I thought that if there was truth in the world, I thought that there may be some big conspiracy and they had sort of grabbed it all and bundled all the books up and buried them in the North Pole or something. So I was ignorant. I was totally, I had no idea what concepts of God, nothing. No
Yeah.
train, nothing. I had no upbringing other than Christmas, or it just was just like nothing to me. So
Yeah.
the way, excuse me, I'm going to grab a drink just real quick.
All right.
The way that I, best can explain it was as I was meditating on I was sitting on this on the mountain behind my house, beautiful mountain called La Concha. It's a just magnificent piece of rock in the southern Spain. It's just beautiful. It's not massive to the point where you can't see it, and it's not small where it's just a hill. It's a real mountain, but it's like manageable. It's like you can walk
Okay.
up it in like 4 or 5 hours in like a hot, steep walk with some little climbing. But it's a real mountain. It's beautiful, and it's I think what makes it special is because it is manageable size. And I would go up there often, and I had my little dog with me at the time, who also was divine medicine to me because in my despair, I had gone to one of my bars, which was on the beach. It was a beach bar one day, and I found right outside the door of this little beach bar hut that I had, there it looked like a big dead rat, but it was a dog. It was a little terrier. So it
Okay.
looked like a big rat, but it was a little terrier, and its long hair was all it had been soaked, and it had sort of it looked like it had stuck to the ground. It looked like it looked like a dead rat. And
Yeah.
ants all walking around, and so I thought this thing was dead. And the more that I looked at it, I realized that no, it might be alive. And I get some water, and I start trying to just give it a little bit to drink, a little, wet its nose, and before long, it's like, oh, his little tongue, and he's like, oh my goodness, it's alive. And so
Right.
you're trying to help the little thing, and within 10 minutes, this thing popped back to life, and it popped on its feet, and its little ears, and it was all scraggly, but it was like a little dog, and it had big holes in its neck. It had been like this Rottweiler had like tried to kill it, or thought it did, dragged it. Someone said they saw it being dragged through the sea and the waves. It was being shaken. This dog was shaking it. And so it ran off to die. I think dogs do that sometimes. They get really
Yeah.
wounded. They like run off into the bush and they just lie down and die. So it had run off to die right outside my bar. And but it came back to full life. And I was like, oh my goodness, look at the holes. Let's get it to the vet quick. I was on my bike and drive this thing, go to the vet. So I think it was like a Sunday afternoon. Emergency vet somewhere, and they took it, they shaved, stitched it up, and all this. And I rescued this cool little dog, when I used to come home and I was so depressed, it was so happy to see me, and I named it. I didn't have faith, but I had a sense that it was a gift. I looked up and I said, "This is a gift from the stars. This is a
Right.
gift from the stars." It was the only way I could interpret it because I didn't believe in God.
Right.
So I called the little dog Cosmos. He was the gift from the stars, and he was medicine to me because every day I came home, he'd be happy to see me. He'd
Yeah.
be little wagging his tail, and I was like, "Oh my God, a little friend, a little
Right.
companion in my misery," and that really sustained me to this next season. Because when I was on the mountain by myself, the dog was with me. I'd ride my motorcycle, sit on the tank. It was small. It was a little. It was a Cairn Terrier, about this big. It's this little dog,
Yeah.
a little skinny thing with long hair, and I had a bandana. And I was like, "This is my little friend," and it was great. Me and Cosmo sitting on the mountain, and as I was there, and the La Concha Mountain is a limestone mountain, and where I was sitting was just bare rock.
Okay.
But out of the like the crag and the rock right where I was, there was a little acorn tree. Must have been an oak tree of sorts. In Spain, they have them. A lot of them they get the cork for the wine bottles from, and so it was growing out of this crag, and I was fascinated. I'm like, oh, look at this! This is somehow an acorn has fallen down into this crack. You couldn't even see where, and there's probably water down there or dirt, and it germinated, and this thing grew, and it grew out of the rocks. And then it's probably like maybe the leaves and, like I said, dirt or something, whatever was enough. The environment was enough for the thing to grow, and it was a small little bush, and it had hundreds of little acorns all over it. And so whether it was an immature tree because it couldn't grow properly being stuck on the rock, it might have just been stunted, or it was a bit, I don't know, but it was small enough to put your arms around it. It had little acorns. And I sat there and I took one of them off the tree, and I was like, wow, look at this thing. It's amazing. I said, here, this thing's growing out of the rock, and it's got this little like nut and then this little cup, and somehow it knows at the right time to sort of let go of the nut, and the nut falls and then bounces on the ground, and a critter picks it up and runs off with it and buries it over there. And oh my goodness, another tree comes up and more acorn. Then it gets really big, and there's millions of some in my mind. I'm like, oh, this like exponential growth of one acorn turning into millions of trees and unknown. It was just oh, it was like amazing. And then I look at the little cup that's holding the acorn. I said, one hand I've got the acorn. I said, this is the star. He's like the football player. He's the star player. He's the nut. He's going to turn into a tree. But this guy is just the servant. He's just holding the star. He's just holding. He falls to the ground and he rots away and dissolves into nothing.
Yeah.
But then I was looking closer. I said, yeah, but look at the design on the edge of the around the rim of this little cup. It's beautiful. There's a pattern.
Yeah.
I was like, well, what's the point of that? I said, this thing's going to just dissolve why is it so beautiful if it's going to dissolve and just turn to dust? It's not turning into a tree. And right at that moment, right at that question, is as if God split my mind in half, and he revealed himself right then as the designer in a voice that it's not an audible voice that we can say, but it was a voice that I knew that it wasn't me speaking to myself. It was someone else saying to me, I'm the designer of this thing you're looking at. And I was like, oh, no, I had never had that thought, that creation that I had been in awe of all my life, this beautiful wonder of nature, was the artistry of the creator, that this was the sculpture garden of God that I had lived my life in. And I was like blown away. And I grabbed my dog and I ran down the mountain and I jumped on my motorcycle, drove to where I was living at this little wall around this little house I was in, got my dog and threw him over the wall. It wasn't a high wall, but it was a garden behind there. And he just flew over the wall. And I raced off with my bike full speed to my mother's house. And I went running. She lived in an apartment. I went running up the stairs. Mom. And she's like, what is up, Julian? And Jules. I'm like, God exists. And she says to me in her very English, she says, I've been trying to tell you that for 22 years.
Oh,
she had faith. It was very shallow, but she had faith.
yeah.
She always used to say to me to believe, and I would be, that's rubbish and nonsense, stupid. And it's just like, no one can even, I need a reason. I need reasons to understand and believe. I need to see. I need to it's got to make sense to me.
Right.
It made a lot of sense to me. Here's God showing, I made all this stuff. It's like he's the artist, and this is all of his stuff. It's like, it's obvious. It's all things made by something. Somebody's mind behind it, whether we create it as artists or whether God made it as the great creator. So that then, as far as how that came about, I was so open and hungry and desperate and really seeking. Like, you can see I was staring at this little cup.
Yeah.
Someone answer someone make sense of this, because I cannot make sense of it. And God himself finally says, here, let me explain. Let me explain. Bingo. And you're like, Shazam. And my whole life forever was changed. And that began a remarkable spiritual journey. Again, miraculous journey. It's been a wonderful, wonderful journey of faith. And at that time I went from an atheist to a theist. I had not yet become a follower of Jesus.
Okay. Okay. That's an amazing story. Amazing story. And it's fascinating to me that, um, in the way you described it, it wasn't an audible voice, but it was an internal knowing that that message was coming from somebody else outside of you. And it was a realization of a designer to an artist that, hey, I'm real. Been trying to get your attention all along, but now you've got to the place where I could actually speak to you and you would hear it. That's amazing. Um, from that point on, does that, as you were saying, it started a new chapter for you. Does that turn into a new desire to be creative yourself and amplify what you've been trying to do with your art career? Or is it more of the interest of, all right, I need to know more about this great creator?
Yep, that's pretty much very accurate there. I'm really enjoying how you are piecing this together, Rich, and you're able to understand those dynamics. It's marvelous. It really is. And that's
Thank you.
exactly, yeah, that really it's a gift that you have. And that's really, really special because not everyone gets it and they can process it and actually return with an explanation. Because that's pretty much exactly it. My thirst and hunger for truth eclipsed my not desire because I had an art studio set up in the house where I threw the dog over the wall. In my little house that I lived in, I had my art studio and I was producing. I was always producing, even running my bar. I was always trying to get back to my studio. I always wanted to paint. I wanted to get back and paint, create. And so I did. And it was nothing prolific by any means, but I was creating, I was doing those. And so, but once this epiphany happened, that for quite a season would eclipse my art because all I wanted to do was learn. And so, and that leads to this next chapter, which is then the beginning of a journey of then, okay, after this happens, I sat on my porch for days, if it could have been weeks. It was in September of 92. And again, the season had ended, the summer season, so it was very quiet. And that means the bar was closed Monday through Friday. We'd only open the weekends. So I had a lot of time to myself, a lot of time to sit around at that time. And now I'm in this mode. If this happened to me and by myself, it's not, I couldn't tell really anybody because I told my mother, but anybody else would just be laughing and mocking me. And they already thought that these guy's nuts. The bar that we opened and run was called Locos, was called Crazy. So any excuse that they could be like crazy. Yeah, he is. And then, so I would be sitting on my porch by myself, just like waiting. I had this sense, just wait. I didn't know where to turn. I had no idea how am I going to find out more? Who,
Yeah.
who, or what was this thing? What happened to me? No idea. No idea. And then I have this encounter where I'm sitting on the porch looking down into the courtyard and I see two people and they're going knocking on people's doors. No idea who they were. But I thought, or sensed, I said, they are coming to speak to me. So I stood up and I waved them like, hello. And they quit. They made a beeline to my front door.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about them or who these people were. It turns out it's this group called Jehovah's Witnesses. No idea who they were.
Okay.
No idea. No knowledge. And they came and I started asking questions and they started answering some of my questions. I was like, wow, this is very interesting. So they began to visit my home and they they came this one time and they said, what we usually do is, we like to come and visit people like half an hour a week and, try to have a Bible study with them. I'm like, well, that's not enough. I said, no, because I was in the time I wasn't working. I had all week to myself. And I said, I'm going to come to your house 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday. And I want to really get to the bottom of this. And so they were like, so I turn up on my motorcycle, and the biker turns up to this old guy's house. And I would spend 3 hours a day, Monday, Friday, burning up all their books, going through it all. And again, I didn't know who these people were, what they were. My mother at the time, she got wind of it, and now she goes back to some English church down there trying to get this information on the Jehovah's Witnesses and this, that. I didn't know what they were, but they were the only people that were making any sense to me at the time. They were there. This was what God was using. I had no idea. And that's a whole very interesting chapter of my life that ends with me being a missionary in Almeria, Spain. I had pursued the calling that came on my life. I went to the mission field, again, by myself, again, studying the Bible by myself, all alone. I had met somebody who had helped me understand it. I had this remarkable second experience, which was studying the gospel now of Jesus Christ. I had this conversion where I was born again. And again, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't, from the mountaintop now to my study, and I'm studying this, I had no idea. And I have this incredible encounter with God now. And I have this visitation of the Holy Spirit in this room by myself. And it was as if the scales and the blinders of this the spiritual environment that I was in began to come off, because now I'm reading and studying the Bible, and I'm seeing all these contradictions, what I'd been learning with this group that I was affiliated with. And I'm like, what in the world? And then I'm like, hold on a second. And I'm like, this doesn't line up. And, it's very important for me that things got to line up, make sense. And so it begins another great traumatic chapter in my life, because then it's spiritual shipwreck that I have, because these people were not as nice as they presented themselves to be. And I had no idea about it, again, other than I would stand up and I was preaching, and I'd start preaching the gospel. I said, look, the gospel is by faith. It's by faith in Jesus Christ. And it's, you can't buy your way and earn your way, because they're all this like religious, very religious. It's a cult. It's a full-blown, cult. Again, I had no idea. But they began to persecute me, and they were chasing me. Basically, these people wanted to get me in front of their congregation, of these people, and destroy my testimony, my story, so that they could discredit me and get rid of me, because I was a threat to their entire operation because of what I was saying. So I was like, well, before you can do that, I'm just going to write a long treatise exposing the lies that you're teaching, and sent it off to their headquarters, which is in Brooklyn, New York. And I said goodbye, and I got as far away from them as I could before they could really hurt me and do damage. It was already terrible what I had experienced. It was shocking. I was so shocked. And then that led me, as this remarkable experience as a Christian, someone who had come to this dramatic encounter with a resurrected Christ, that again, I'm all alone in my study, and there's no one there. There's no preacher. There's no one saying. I'm just by myself reading this book, studying this book, wanting to find out what makes it work and how it fits together. And it was so powerful. It went on for months. It was so powerful. When I had this experience of being baptized in the Holy Spirit, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know what being born again was. I had no reference point. I had nothing.
Right. Yeah.
And I would be walking around and I'd be looking over my shoulder, because it was like someone's like following me or like with me. And it was like this awareness of the presence of somebody else so strong. And I'd drive along in my little car and I can remember pulling off to the side of the road and like sliding down in my seat. And I'd be there lying down with the seat back, and I'm like, God, I didn't know the English term. I knew it in Greek because I was studying the Bible in Greek. The books that I'd got gave me the original scripture. It's called koinonia. And I'm like, oh, I'm having koinonia with God. I'm lying here in this like cloud of, the presence of God was so strong, overwhelming. And I'm like, I didn't know what's going on. I couldn't sleep at night. I had to go out to the supermarket. I'd buy a bottle of wine and I'd go out and I'd chug this whole bottle down just to shut my mind down so I could sleep. It was like it was on fire in my,
Hmm.
it was you couldn't shut it down. And
Yeah.
the only way, glug, 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 bottle of wine. I'm going to go to bed now because now I'm
Right.
ready to sleep now. And I did. And it was the only way I could function, but it was remarkable. And the beautiful part about it is because I was just, again, ignorant, so willing, open, excuse me. And it all could happen because I didn't have any objections or filters because I had nothing. I was just like,
Right.
I want the truth. I want the truth. I want it all.
Yep.
I want it all. And that then, led me on back to my hometown, off the mission field, packed my bags, left I left Spain for the United States. I was going to go and become a missionary in South America because I was fluent in Spanish, and I thought that Americans were less inclined to hear what I might have to say, and that Hispanics were much more being Spanish and a much more open disposition. I thought that I'd go and share the gospel with those folks and go to South America. I had a lot of prejudices about the United States, which were all prejudice. They weren't accurate. Growing up in Europe, you get
Sure.
this anti-Americanism in Europe. Like you just again, you don't know. You
Right.
just they're just affecting your mind. And but once I came to the U.S., all the blinders fell off, and I was like, wow, this is nothing like what they said. And I love it here. And I think, I had always met Americans growing up who were always fantastic people, and they were
Yeah.
always contradicting this narrative that I was being fed because the people I met were like, no, the art teacher, David Bodley, he was the best person I
Yes.
ever met. I mean,
Yes.
these people across the board from when I was a kid, wonderful, wonderful people, always kind hearted. And, they just were so different to Europeans in the sense that they were very generous, very kind hearted. And this wasn't a faith aspect, they were just people being people.
Yes.
And I was like really touched by that. So when I came here, that's what happened. And so my trip to Mexico eventually wasn't God's plan for me. It was just a plan to get me here. And my whole life then grew and developed here in New York in a town called Nyack, which is about 200 miles south of where I am. It's actually southeast of where I am near New York City. And that's where I met my wife. Again, I had some remarkable, and I write about it. Look, the book that I have, I write about a lot of it in my book because it's just the part of the Odyssey. But I've had just so many incredible encounters on the journey because, again, most of the time, Rich, I don't have the means. I didn't have the
Right.
money. I had nothing. I left Spain with $200 in my pocket and a bag of clothes and some Bibles. That's all I had. I didn't have
Wow.
anything. And I mean, amazing experiences that of like the manifestation of God's hand of provision for your destiny if you should dare to step out of the comfort of this beautiful place I used to live and the prosperity I could have had and
Yeah.
all the family, and you have to leave it all in pursuit of the most important thing for, in my opinion, is what our existence is all about. If you're willing to leave it all for that pearl of great price, to give it all up, you then experience these manifestations that are they are undeniable and they are magnificent because it just seals your faith more and more each day. You're like, wow, just amazing. I mean, and as I'm talking to you now, I could literally go all day and recount these experiences because
Yeah.
you position yourself and your life to have. And a lot of people on the journey, they would say to me, wow, I wish that type of thing would happen to me. And I'd be like, well, it can, but it won't unless you let go. unless you gotta let go.
Yeah.
You gotta empty your cup out
Yeah.
of all the stuff, which I did. Things, motorcycles, I walked away from it all. I was 22 years old. I owned 3 Hard Rock bars in southern Spain by the time I left.
Oh, wow.
I had 8 employees. I had more money than I knew what to do with. I was making more money. I would find wads of cash in my pants pockets. Like I was stupid. I had motorcycles and toy and all this type of. I lived in Marbella, Spain, one of the most sought after places in Europe, if not in the world now, to live in
Yeah.
Marbella. It was just like, and I walked away from it all. And most people like, what? Why? Why would you want to do that? It's like we spend our whole year working just to spend 2 weeks there, and you want to
Right.
leave? I said, yeah, but it's got nothing for me. It's not for me. And
Yeah.
and so what I would say to people, if you, and this may be for your listeners though, who you hear of transformational spiritual experiences, and you cannot have them if your cup is full. You cannot have them if your cup is stuffed with stuff and things. And if your focus is on the things and the stuff of this world, you can't have it. You can't have both. You have to have an empty vessel that's completely empty. And it's like you're just putting it up to God and saying, fill it up, Lord, fill it with something. And I don't know what it is, but I'm going to go for what, and it might not happen when I want, or it might be completely what I'm not. It usually is. It's nothing what you're expecting, but you position yourself right now to be open to have that encounter, because
Yeah.
it's as if it's unavoidable. If you create the vacuum, by your will and choices and decisions, it will make a space for the divine to fill.
That's amazing. Amazing description. Amazing message for the audience. Um, where I'd like to go next, based off of that, is what do you do with only $200 coming to the US that starts you on this new direction of what I would say, in terms of uh, some Spanish uh, correlation, this new communion that you're having um, with the Creator. What is the process now? Knowing you've only got $200, what am I gonna do to survive?
Well, I needed $200 because in Spain at the time, I had got a flight to the US and I was selling everything that I had left. I had paintings that I had made that
Okay.
I had framed, and I was trying to sell them. You know what it's like. It's like it's just painful. So I give them all away to all my friends, my family, beautifully framed. I'm so glad that I did that. Beautiful works that they it's so glad. Not all of them survived, but there are some, which is wonderful. I sold my photographic camera. Like I was given by my mother like a Canon EOS Rebel at the time, so I
Yeah.
started really
Okay.
to sort of pursue my photography. I sold that. It's the only thing valuable I had left. I'd left everything 2-3 years before in the bar business. I left it all. My family was not helping me at all. They had rejected me when I left to go to the mission field and walked away from all my stuff. They totally rejected me. And then when I came back, because if I walked away from that whole experience that I had in the mission on the mission field, we're not helping. They had folded out. They said, we'll help you if you come back to your life the way you had it. Because I was the engine behind basically the success that they were having. I built
Okay.
everything, and
Okay.
they were like, "Yeah, you come back. We'll help you if you." And I'm like, "I'm not coming back. I got to get out of here as quick as I can. I'm going to die if I come back to this town." And so I had the only thing of value I had left was my camera, and I was like, "Okay, I got to sell it." Like I said, you got to just get rid of it and got to facilitate the next step. And it allowed me to buy the plane ticket and left me $200. And the woman in the travel agency says to me, she says, "Oh yeah," because I was going to go to California to see this friend that I had met in the mission field, an American gentleman, again from the US who was part of this JW organization, but he was an outlier. He was the guy who taught me how to study the Bible alone. That was what gave me the freedom. He got me Christian books. He bought me shoes that fit my feet because I had big feet in Spain. Everyone is much smaller, so he couldn't. He was a really kind, generous guy, loving. He became like a father figure to me. But he was also a great student, and he would always encourage me to study the scriptures. Don't waste your time with all their books, which was like anathema to say. It was like, oh my goodness, it's like in this cult of control, and that was what gave me my freedom. So I was going to go and stay with him in Hemet, California. And so I needed to get to California from New York. I had a ticket from Marbella, Malaga, Spain to New York, and then I would get a plane across the country because the travel agent says, oh yeah, she says in America, she said, airplanes are like buses. You just get there and for $200, you can jump on a plane and fly to California. And I was like, great. All right, wonderful. I didn't do any more research than that. I arrive at JFK at like 5 a.m. And again, I had no idea. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I walk up to an American Airlines desk. It was very early. There was only a few people around. I got a whole wave of New York attitude because they're very abrupt and very brash in New York. It's like, what do you want? What's this? And I'm like, oh, I'm looking for a ticket to to California, please. I got $200. $200. He says, your one-way ticket's going to be like $600. And I was like, excuse me? No, $600.
Yeah.
I got $200 and I'm in New York and I've got to get 3,000 miles. And I was stunned. And I was like, no, I didn't. I was really stunned. I walked around completely like someone took a bat to the side of my head, like a completely stupid in the airport. Like, what am I going to do? I can't, this $600 one way.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could find a $200 ticket if you shopped around or had bought it in advance. They didn't tell me that in Spain. They just sort of made it sound like it was like a bus depot.
Right.
Well, it wasn't. So I was like, what in the world am I going to do? And before long, I had remembered the name Greyhound buses. And I said, I got to try and get a bus. Maybe I can afford a bus. And I start fumbling around trying to get some dollars in exchange for the money that I had, and then get the change, and then call up Greyhound. And this was the best part, I think, of that really discouraging moment, because I really was discouraged and very concerned.
Sure.
And it sounded like some big black mama on the end of the phone, and I told her my story of woe, and she's like, "Well, son," she's like, "Welcome to the United States of America," like this, and I was like, "Oh, that was the best thing I heard." It was so good. It was like a breath of fresh air. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I managed to buy a ticket, a one-way Greyhound bus ticket from New York to California for $147 was the price of the ticket, and so I got a one-way ticket, and I was like, okay, I can get to California. It's going to be 3 days on the bus, and that was an adventure all of itself. Sure. And I had then the balance left over that I could buy some food, and I was set. I was going to do it. So I made it to California and made it stay with my friend there. That didn't work out. It was all sorts of troubles that he was having, again, cult troubles, because he had come to very similar conclusions that I had. And he had began to share them in his circles, and he was this old respected guy, and they all turned on him. His wife left him, his sister left him, everybody abandoned this guy. It was total devastation what happens. And so he's living by himself in an apartment with no furniture, sleeping on the floor. And he says to me, "Oh, you can come and stay here." And so I said, well, I got no choice. So we camped out in his place, studying the Bible, trying to work out what's going on, what we believe. But he was in a bad way, and it was not good for me. It was going to drag me down into his darkness, which I was trying to stay afloat myself. So, but it was the first time in Hemet, California, I went to an art show, like an art, festival that when this, like in a park or something, everyone's selling their paintings. And it was the first art festival I'd been to. And it was the first place I met a woman who was a Christian and who was an artist. And it was the first time I met a Christian woman. And it was unbelievable, this just instant friendship that we had. And it was like, I felt like, this is great. This is sanity. This makes sense. and there was art involved, and so it was really good for me at that time. But that experience then collapsed because of my poor old friend, his collapse of his life. But right at that time, my mother had come to the United States with her long-term partner, and she was going to Connecticut to stay with his children who were in Connecticut. And she was always, she was never impressed that I left, always very angry with me, very disappointed because she wanted her son close. And I'm like, sorry, Mom, I just can't, I got to find my own way. She was devastated by that. And so she was always plotting to see how she could get me back to Marbella. Always, I was scheming. So, but I'm in California now. I have no money. I have nowhere to go. My plan to go to Mexico wasn't going to happen. I couldn't get a job as I thought. I was trying to work under the table and find some way to get an income. And in Little Hemet, the town wasn't really open to hiring people without paperwork. I tried to sort out my paperwork issue because my visa was running out. I then went to a lawyer to try and get an extension to I had a tourist visa. And he's like, no, I can't help you with that. He said, but I can offer you this. He says, I can offer you a full green card. I said, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, it's $10,000. He says, I'll get you a wife. I'll get you a wife, and you're going to marry this woman. You're going to live with her for like 3 to 6 months, and then get a job and do this, and then you divorce her, and you got a green card. Like this. And
oh my gosh.
And I was like, what? It's like, I'm not going to do that. I said, that's not what that's not who I am. I'm not going to do that. And so part of my story, my journey is that I run out of status and I become an illegal, overstaying my status in this country. And that's another dramatic layer that couples with what happens to me. But I then go back to Connecticut because my mother does arrive, and she knows my situation. She's like, well, I'll pay for your bus ticket back to Connecticut if you want to come and stay with us. Little did I know she's trying to get me on a plane to go back to Spain because I have no money.
Right.
And she's like, oh, I got this guy. I got him. So I arrive in Westport, Connecticut, and I think one of the most transformational experiences that are remarkable in the sense of giving you the confidence that it's going to be okay, that God is with you, takes place with my mother that very same week or 2 weeks. I stayed with them for like a month before they went back. But right before they went back, this remarkable experience takes place.
All right. I'm excited. Yes, I'm excited. Tell us all what this experience is.
Well, after being there a couple of weeks and trying to find work, my mother was very helpful. She did try to call up friends that she had. And it was a woman that I had actually met in Spain who lived in Nyack, New York. And her husband was a contractor, and she was trying to connect me with him. It wasn't happening. And so nothing really happening, which I think my mother was very pleased about, because the more that the doors were closing, the more she had a chance to ship me off to Spain. Because she kept telling me, oh, I'll pay for your ticket back to Spain. You got a free ticket back to Marbella, sunny Marbella. She'd be constantly dangling it in front of me like this, Yeah. And I'd be like, so then she said, well, I'll take you to New York City. Let's go and see. I'd never been. And we jump on a train from Westport, Connecticut, and go to Manhattan and 42nd Street Station. And we walk around and we're like, wow, this is an amazing, amazing place. I'd never been, obviously heard about it, but just mind-blowing, the buildings. And it was a beautiful day, blue sky. But on the train ride down there, this was just such a marvelous moment. I have this, I remember this was the summer, this was like June of 1996 is the, June 1996. In the winter, in the Christmas of 95, I was still in Marbella, Spain, working at an establishment my brothers had. It wasn't the bar that I built, but they had opened like a cafe, trying to sort of have an alternate to the nighttime business. Did food and burgers and that type of thing. And when I went back from the mission field, they were like, well, we'll give you a job. You can cook. And I went back and I was cooking for them in the kitchen, making burgers and stuff. And it was good. I enjoyed that very much. Again, you can be creative, very creative when you're cooking. And it was Christmas time, and this kid walks into their bar, and I didn't recognize him at first, and like long hair, and he's got this walk, and he's like, "Yo," and he's like, he was all like Americanized, and I was like, "Whoa, what's that?" And it turns out this kid I went to school with and had worked with me in the bar years before, and he had been in the United States and studying in Stony Brook University in Long Island, and I said to him, "Wow, that's great." He says, "I'm going to America myself in February," and he's like, "Well, pay me a visit," and he gives me a little piece of paper with his name and his phone number on it,
All
and
right.
it's in Stony Brook University and in Long Island, New York. And I thought, wow, I thought it was all the same place. So on the train ride now in June, so this is 6 months later, June, of the following year. I was going to New York, and I said to my mother, I said, I remember, I said, oh, we can visit Leandro, because I didn't think Long Island I thought it was all the same thing.
Right. Right.
And in my wallet, I had the little piece of paper with his name and number. And I was like, yeah, we can visit Leandro. And I had this in my mind, a clear picture of me meeting him. And I was like, oh, this is great. We get to New York City, like I said, I'm in awe of the buildings, just the drama of New York. Manhattan is really always just amazing to visit. And I get a burden to start looking for this kid, and I forget to even try to call him. My mother, you're so sort of taken by what you're seeing. But then I'm looking around in the crowds on Fifth Avenue, and I start scanning all the faces. I'm like, I'm looking for this kid, Leandro. I'm looking for Leandro. And we're walking, my mother and I walk from Central Park all the way down Fifth Avenue towards what was then the World Trade Center. And she's like, we're walking for hours. It's a long walk. And we're going along, and she's like, my feet hurt. Let's get a cab. And I'm like, no, we got to keep walking, because I'm looking. I have this, for whatever reason, I get this burden to look for this kid in amongst crowds of that. This is June in the summertime in New York City, and it is packed. Man, Fifth Avenue is just a sea of faces, tourists and New Yorkers.
Yeah.
We keep walking, and I keep looking. We cross over. We end up on Broadway, and Broadway quietens down. There's like hardly any people on Broadway. We're walking down towards Washington Square Park, and three guys come walking towards my mother. She's walking ahead of me. It's like two Rastafarians in like green khaki fatigues and tea cozy hats and glasses, and then this in the middle, this little short guy with long hair and the baggy pants and glasses. He's got the walk, and he's like, yo, and they're walking up the street past my mother. Well, I walk straight up to him, and I look him this guy in the face, and I said, now that's Leandro in the middle of the street. Now he stands there with his glasses, and you remember he'd pull his glasses down like that. And they've been smoking pot in Central Park and in the Washington Square Park. They're all stoned. And he's like, no way, Jules, what are you doing? My mother is jumping like a mad woman in the middle of the street, screaming, I can't believe this, I can't believe this, Leandro, this type of thing. And I'm standing there like not surprised. I spent the last 3 or 4 hours looking for this guy in the midst of whatever 8 million people in the metro area, and the broader metro area might be like 18 million people.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing about it, this is how, again, there's an encouragement when you pursue your destiny and you empty your cup and you go with that voice that's leading you.
Yeah.
That piece of paper he gave me was a phone number of his digs at university on Long Island, which was 3 hours away. And in June, it was closed for the summer. He was off, and he was living in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I had no idea. And this kid, he used to work for me in my bar. He looked up to me. He was my younger brother's friend. He was the person that then, after going back home and looking for work and not having anything, I called him up and I said, Leandro, have you got any way? My mom's trying to get me to go back to Spain. I got nowhere to go. And he's like, well, you can stay with me, he says. And he says, I got to ask my wife. And it turns out he had married his classmate to get the green card to stay in the US. So he's living in an apartment in the Lower East Village in New York City with a girl who's living with her boyfriend in the apartment, and he's pretending to be her husband living on the couch just in case the immigration services come to do a door check to see if they're really married. And he says, let me ask my wife. I'm going to see if you can sleep on the other couch. And she gets back, she says, sure. So I go into this East Village, and I'm now sleeping on the couch with the husband whose wife is in the bedroom with the boyfriend. And I'm like, this is just so typical of the way things work out. But it was my next step. And that then became the stepping point. He was very kind. Again, he looked up to me. He's like, here's $60, give me some money. My mother gave me $20. She was furious that I was going to stay. She thought she had me in the bag. She thought she's like, I said, Mom, I'm staying. And she's like, I'm not helping you. Here's $20. And it was enough to buy the train ticket one way from Westport to New York City. Left me like $12 to buy a sandwich and that's it. I didn't have anything, no more money. So he was very kind. He's like, here's $60. He helps me out for the next few weeks, feeding me and giving me a place to stay. While the people that I had originally mentioned that were friends of my mother from Spain that I grew up in, she was living in Nyack, New York, her husband being a contractor, they had said that they may have work for me. And 2 weeks later, they called up and said, yeah, we want you to paint our house. And I got a ride up to Nyack, New York with this friend of mine, Leandro. And I went and I then painted her house for the summer, and I stayed with them, and they found me a place to stay eventually. And my life in Nyack, New York took off, where I eventually meet my wife, go to seminary, try to sort out what I believed, get my mind straight as far as what the creed was, what I believed as now a follower of Jesus. And my whole life changed. I opened a business, a woodworking business, and this is again where the arts came into it, because I met a guy at this church that I was at, really nice young man who had a furniture business. And he says, yeah, he said, painted furniture is really popular right now. And I said, well, I'm trying to find my way. He knew I needed work. And he says, well, why don't you try and paint this chair and we'll see what we can do. And I took the chair home and I did some flowers and antiquing, and I made the thing look, interesting. And it sold for like $200 or $300. And he's like, here's $150 to you. And I was like, wow. I was like, bingo. I was like, that's amazing. I said, you see little money come in when you have nothing. It's really good. It was really a help. And then that seed then became my own business, where I would eventually open my own business by faith, not having any money, once again, just enough to pay the rent to this guy, getting furniture off the streets and trash day and painting furniture. And I opened a business that my wife and I would run them for the next 6 years, have children, and really grow in many ways in business, as well as, as an individual, as a husband and a father. That stage was fantastic. Nyack was a beautiful place to live. Antique town. There was a lot of wealth there. There was a lot of celebrities. And I constantly was trying to get back to the canvas. I was as I was painting furniture. Sometimes it was just painted red or painted black. Sometimes it was distress at an antique. Other times it was decorative and make something artistic out of it. So I would be like trying to paint furniture with art and trying to do something, to the point where when I was painting furniture in my spray booth, and there'd be like splattered paint all over the floor, I'd find myself staring at the floor like, whoa, look at that. There was like this amazing composition of just totally random paint splashed on the floor. So I'd get out my jigsaw and cut the floor out, and I'd be sticking it on the wall. Like, look at that. That's a painting right there. And it constantly was drawing me back to the canvas. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And yet I wasn't able to paint because of the pressure of running a business. And the money, Nyack was extremely expensive. The rent was huge. Living above this, it was huge. We had a huge overhead, and I was just strapped every day, just in this constant, struggle to survive economically, just to pay the money to sort of keep the business open, the employees, and this. So you couldn't create, you couldn't be the artist. And then that would all change with a call to ministry to upstate New York, Nyack, where I am right now. I mean, Elmira, New York, where think life would again take a major change for the better in many ways, and also for the worse. It became a real crucible of trials and tests for me. Um, but after being here nearly 20 years, because that was in um, 2006, I believe it is when we moved up here,
Okay.
19 years. Oh, that's my dog. What's up, Luna? After 19 years, I'm in my art studio now, and I'm very blessed. I have an amazing space because property prices in upstate New York are very affordable, and the property that I bought was very affordable. It had these brownfield contamination issues that weren't a problem to use for. I got to just deal with my dog. She's got some drawing pins she just knocked over. But the point
Okay.
I'm trying to say is that, again, seeking those silver linings in the midst of what people don't see, the artists, we can see sometimes very differently to how other people see. I've
Right.
had this building now for like 11 years. It's 6,000 square feet, and it's a massive
Oh, wow.
space, and it's a playground for an artist. Yeah, I can do, as you mentioned, I'm a large format painter. I can paint huge paintings. I can do small things. I have woodworking. I have metalworking. I have my photography. I mean, I can do what I want,
Yeah.
and it's affordable. It's not because I have made huge money, or it's not that. This building cost me virtually nothing compared to what it's worth, because I took a risk buying it and did the research and found out what most people didn't do, were afraid of, and it allowed me to buy it. And so, that's my story in many, many ways, that you manage to, if you want to put it in a term, succeed in that way, but not in the way that most people are thinking. It's not because of any means or finances or economy or what, nothing. It's faith and pursuit of your destiny, having an empty vessel that allows all of these things to happen. And then years later, you look at your life and you're like, wow, I got a beautiful wife of now nearly 26 years and three wonderful grown young adult children, all wonderful. It's a blessing, and the fruit of all this struggle and hardship and perseverance is then revealed, and you're like, you know what, you might not have what everyone's saying you need to have. I don't care about that stuff. The
Yeah.
things that I really care about, I do. That's what's most important to me. On that note, I'm going to pick up these drawing pins before she eats one. Hold on one second.
That is exactly what I'm trying to do, extract the gold. Um, One of the things that you mentioned earlier was the fact that being in New York was part of a crucible experience for you. And one of the things that I'm seeing as well as part of the story is this, and I think many creatives go through this and experience this, is this periods of where there's lots of accomplishment and success and sustainability, and then there's this other part where there's just nothing and we're trying to just make ends meet and get by to the next day, that kind of thing. What did this newfound faith and belief do for you in the support of this crucible experience that you went
Well,
into?
the truth is that my faith is what's brought the crucible experience, because
Okay.
the Christian faith, in essence, is all about a cross of suffering. And in order for God to change us, you see, this is the difference between what I view as a living, vibrant relationship with a living God, personal relationship, rather than religious form or religious obligation, and conforming your life by your will to a certain set of precepts and do's and don'ts, which religion prescribes. All religions prescribe that. God's mechanism for change, we not that you don't aspire or don't try or don't change your efforts or your habits because you know what you were doing before was negative and this is a better way to do it. But the internal change of the human heart, the internal rewiring of our minds, and the thinking and understanding of the conforming of our character and nature to the image and likeness of Christ, is not something that can be accomplished through human effort or human will. That's where religion is a poison and a curse, because people think it's about, oh, look at me, and it's all performance, and I'm just, it's like an act. It's like being the putting a show on. It's the furthest thing from the truth. And the truth of the matter is that if you truly embrace the cross, if you truly embrace the journey because you really want what you have found, it's going to cost you everything, and it could cost you your life even,
Yeah.
but it will cost you everything that is an obstacle to you being conformed and transformed into what you want. I don't want to be the way I was. I want to be changed. I don't want to think like that. I don't want to react like that. I want to be patient. I want to be long suffering. I want a character that is kind. I want to be gentle. I want to be understanding. I want to be right. I want to be just. I want all the character attributes of God that are revealed. We may have little spatterings of them here and there, little, because we're in his image and likeness, but we have a lot of barnacles on the boat, a lot of stuff that's got to come off. And the process, the crucible I had prayed for, and this was the sort of the schizophrenia of the faith experience that I have had, meaning you, out of one corner of your mouth, you're like, yes, I used to pray, oh God, put me in thine holy mortar and pestle and grind me fine, and then reform the dust into something wonderful and all this. And then at the other corner of my mouth, I say, yep, I'm going to do it my way. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it like this. And you're basically saying, yeah, it sounds good, and my prayer sounds really good, but I really do not want the process because it's going to be painful. So I'm going to choose. I'm going to have to let my dog in a second. I'm going to have to choose to go another way with my own imagination on how I can make myself appear to be so much more special and spiritual, and all this the pride that we all bear in our human hearts is so awful. And God said, yeah, but that's just nasty. And you're like, yeah, but look at me. And he's like, yeah, well, I'm going to deal with me. I'm going to deal with you. And I'm going to put you in the crucible because that's what you wanted. And that's the only way to get what I want for you. And
Yeah.
you don't at first, you don't skip into it, suffering. I'm going to go let Luna in a second. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Pick up on
Yeah.
suffering. 1 second. Now you got that there. In order to attain to the transformed life, the real transformation that we want in one way, but we don't in the other because of the pain component, God is going to lead you into it anyway. And you can always choose, because he doesn't force anybody, but you are invited into a fellowship of the sufferings of Christ that are brutal. But it's the only way that I have experienced transformation, that I can really look at my life and say, yeah, I am not the same person. And it never happened through any success that I had. It never happened through any good that I did. It never happened through anything. It always happened through betrayal, or it always happened through falling flat on your face, some external experience that was beyond your control, that just brought a whirlwind of just pain and suffering into your life. And then you have to decide how you're going to process it and how much you're going to let God use it to really transform you and mold you and fashion you and, really make you into the person that you are meant to be and that you want to be. And so Elmira has been that. Elmira is in many ways is a strange place, because it used to be a very popular, busy, beautiful, thriving place in the 40s and 50s of the last century. They had like 70 passenger trains a day coming through here. It was like the place to go from New York City. All the rich and famous used to go to Elmira. It's full of beautiful buildings and that, but it's like a ghost town. It's like upstate New York depressed. It's like, you go out today, Saturday. I'm looking, I got my cameras like around there's like no one around. There's like nobody. There's like nobody.
Yeah.
It's like, but it also comes with a price, because, it suffers from what's called the brain drain. And you have anybody who wants to make something of their life, they leave this place. So the coming here is like in reverse. And yet, you come to a place mentality wise is very sort of narrow mentality. You have a very provincial thinking. You can come up very, very quickly against the old boys network. And if you're not in line with them, they can just become hostile. So I've had from betrayal in churches, just brutal betrayal, just political people in churches that just shocks you to the core. Um, to then interpersonal relationships and those type of things, betrayal even with friendships, and just even down to a foster son that we had, and how somebody who you can be thinking you're doing so much more, so much for, giving so much to, can suddenly turn around and just betray you in ways that you just like, i can't
Oh,
i
oh
can't
my
even
God.
conceive of that. So I think the biggest way that I have suffered, and I suffer a lot, is a lot of times it's through um, having unrealistic expectations, that you learn to really temper your expectations and put them down to zero, because the lower you put them, the least the letdown is. And I've really learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
I think being optimistic and having always looking for the upside, or thinking the best of people and trusting people. You want to live your life with an open heart. You want to live like that. But
Right.
boy, it's painful. It's so painful. It comes with consequences that are just on. It just shocks the soul. You're like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this is going on. So I've had numerous shocking experiences like that since I've been in Elmira. I also had personal tragedy, which was the death of our fourth child, Benjamin, who was a special needs boy who was born really when we moved up here in 2006. And his death was a tragedy because it was at the hands of, unfortunately, an incompetent nurse assistant, and she caused his death. And it was a disaster, just an absolute disaster, because of somebody inexperienced who was sent on the job, who didn't know what they were doing, and who
Oh,
insisted they knew what they were doing, and then it caused him to have an embolism and die. He had a like a port in his heart to he needed medicine given to him in this port, and it needed to be flushed on a weekly basis. Otherwise, the tip of the needle that was in the blood flow would build a clot, because
yeah.
the blood was, and so it needed to have the saline flush consistently done,
Yeah.
which my wife knew about. She knew how to do it, but the trained nurse was away, and they sent this stand-in, a young girl who was newly graduated. And my wife was really nervous when she came, and she was watching her. My wife's a very skilled person in this way, very very competent woman, as a mother, as a teacher,
Yeah.
and we're a real woman of courage. And she will speak up first before anyone. That's why I fell in love with her. She's a courageous person, and she will not back down. And you see something, she's just going to say it. So she's standing in a room with this young nurse, fiddling around with this catheter thing, this port in the chest of her son. And she's like, I don't know if you really know what you're doing here. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And she's like watching. She's like, oh, she's like
Right.
trying to be involved. And the girl screws the syringe onto the port to then plunge this um, saline through there, and it's blocked. It wouldn't plunge. It was as if the clot was there.
Yeah.
And it never happened before. My wife's like, okay, this is not normal. You need to stop. We need to call somebody. You need to stop. She's like, no, 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 I know what I'm doing. And she forces this thing, and she plunges.
Oh my God.
Yeah, my son immediately went into shock, because she basically forced a blood clot into the bloodstream of the heart. And this girl was acting like nothing was wrong. She's not, and the boy's goes white, and his all the blood vessels in his body pop to the surface of his skin. It was really something. My wife said, my wife had to call for 911. This is
Oh
the,
my
the,
gosh.
the incompetence was like, and then we're in the country, and so the ambulance trying to get our son and all this, and it was just a disaster. And he was a special needs boy. He had a lot of needs that he had, and you know, when he passed in my arms, we had to obviously process that and say, well, look, this has happened. It is what it is. We can't change this. He had a short life, but he had a powerful little life in 6 months. and the impact that he's had through his death afterwards, through the story that I've told has been remarkable. It's administered to people. But the I think the greatest pain that came with it was when the state, because she was a state supplied
Yeah.
nurse,
Yeah.
they lawyered up and they shut the day. They would basically wouldn't speak to us because they knew something was wrong. And so we had to sort of either say, what are we going to do? Do you just walk away? Do you just say, oh, whatever? Or do you then you want to pursue them and sue them or get some type of compensation or something? And the worst part is because the New York state laws, they had all this tort reform at the time had taken place that capped all of the compensation for situations like that. And then the lawyers that said, well, they said your son was a special need boy and he really doesn't have any value. He really only has
Oh
this,
my God.
and it's terrible to even have to have a conversation like this where they're trying to put a numerical value on the life of a special needs boy who would have grown up special needs.
Yeah.
He was like he had a genetic condition like Down syndrome.
Okay.
So he would have had this condition. He would have needed to be cared for. So they said, well, he doesn't have any, in the eyes of the state, doesn't have any value, and so we can't sue because they're not going to reward you with anything that's going to be worth our time and effort. And that was like, okay, that's like, so a lot of those type of traumas where you feel powerless in the face of the system who is refusing to take responsibility,
Right.
refusing, would have gone a long way, even if they had, they can't admit it because then it gives you more grounds to go after them. So they
Right.
wall up.
Yeah.
But it would have gone a long way if someone had said, hey, you know what, we're terribly sorry or something, it's a tragedy or some type of thing. And so those type of experiences, and you go through them and they're real fires and they challenge you to become bitter, which at times you are because
Yeah.
pain is real.
Yeah.
But because of the grace of God, you can become better through the fire because if you keep bringing it to him and saying, I can't take the pain, I can't deal with it, I can't help me, how do I deal with this? He will always show us a way through to healing and to a redemptive story that you can testify later in your life and say, yeah, that changed my life for the good. As much as it hurt, for the good, I became a better person. I understood God better. I understood life and death better. My son, as painful as it was, he died in my arms. He gave his last little breath in my arms, and that impacted and imprinted on my chest. I can't ever not have that experience. But God can use and uses even those things for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That was my experience. And to see my wife, well into the beginning of the morning stage, wake up, though, whether she was in tears the night before, but wake up with her arms in the air saying, Benjamin's with God. And, just be able to shout that at the top of her voice and say, it's okay. He's gone to a better place.
Yeah.
We don't fear what comes after death because we serve the one who's alive. It changes you because it really makes you connect with what you believe, and it makes what you believe really part of who you are rather than just something I believe. No, this is real. This is really what it is. And those traumas become these incredible instruments for this transformation in our thinking that then affects us for the rest of our days. And we are conformed to a way of thinking that's not the way around us. And, and we've had people that they just, oh my goodness, it's like they viewed the death of our son as so tragic, which it was, but they're so sort of short-sighted in
Right.
life, and it's so confined to their understanding of their short life, and they think this is, oh my goodness, it's unrecoverable. And I said, well, no. I say, the pain is real, and we've been through it, and we've given it up, but we now understand that we live in hope of a world to come, and we live in hope of seeing him again. It's okay. It's just a little patience. Just be a little patient. Time is going to pass, and we will be with him one day in the future. So those type of, moments in the crucible are, everybody goes through them. Some people, you grow to welcome it in the sense of you've seen the transformation that it produces in the past, and suffering becomes, which is unbelievable in the climate we live in today, but it does and can become our bosom buddy. Our best friend becomes our most uninvited usual guest, which is suffering, because through it we become better. And then you're like, wow, well, I want to keep getting better. Well, you're going to keep suffering.
Right. Right. Exactly.
That's the recipe. There's no
Yeah.
way around it. There's no way. There's no way. And
Yeah.
but it's true. It's absolutely true.
One of the things that we touched on very early in the conversation was how art and creativity can help heal traumatic experiences. Has that been something that has allowed you to continue on with what you're doing as well?
As far as the process, the
Process of
participation.
art and helping and healing, yes.
Yeah, I there are times when I know that, just getting into the zone has lifted me out of like a real slump or a real depression, that you just the creative spirit, it changes your perception, it changes how you are in that moment. You're completely changed, because if you can get out of your quicksand and blue funk and get into the mode, you're changed. And many times it's a fight just to reach that. But as a person of faith, I don't turn to that as my only medicine. It's like further. It's like it's like it's a medicine, but it's like an aspirin.
Okay.
Um, Whereas sometimes I need the hydrocodone, or I need the heavy duty pain medicine, and that's my connection and fellowship and friendship with God, and
Okay.
being able to go into that private space, which many times my creative space is. It becomes like a sanctuary when you're in that mode. You're definitely in a place where transformation happens. But many times for me, it's whether it's just being quiet and just going to sit with God in His presence wherever you are. You can be on the beach or in a mountain, or this can be just anywhere in your car.
Yeah.
Um, that is always, transformational, and you learn that pain comes, and it can heal and will heal. Time is also a factor, in healing, without a doubt. But when it's interrelational, where you're dealing with betrayal, or people have wounded you and grieved you, and this, you have to have forgiveness at play, and you have to interact with other people to try to pull out the barbs and the poison, because they're the ones that have inflicted. There's the interaction with other people as the means or method of finding healing. You got to go to the person that's inflicted the wound. You got to go. We did with the nurse. It took us years to. They wouldn't let us speak to her at first with our son. They
Okay.
kept her away because
Yeah.
they're trying to protect her. And it's like, this is the system. But years later, my wife ended up taking my other children. She had been hired by a different medical system, and my wife ended up in getting my other two children examined by her in another medical facility, where my wife had the opportunity to extend forgiveness to her, because
Oh,
this
wow.
person had lived obviously in her own mind with the awareness of what had happened, but there was no resolution, there was no restitution, there was never any closure for her or for us,
Yeah.
because we had to go to God for it, and we got what we needed, and we moved on, and we lived. And Benjamin, in his memory and his who he is, lives with us until that day. But that aspect, the interpersonal component of pain, is something that is so important to find healing in. You can't get it just by. That's why I said, like the aspirin, yeah, you can feel better, but the pain can be still there. And
Right.
those deep, deep wounds that are interpersonal, only really ever get healed when you have a reconciliation with that person, when you sit down with them. And my wife got to say it, and this girl got to apologize. And my wife got to pray for her and forgive her and say, we forgive you, and we move on. And that's huge closure, huge closure for her and for us. And then for me, in many ways, where I've been really betrayed and there's not been closure, you have to be able to eventually let go of that, because you can't hold on to it and live and be healthy. You just can't. I was just poisoned for many, many years with this one really huge betrayal that we had up here in Elmira in a church setting. Really huge, really huge. And it never was, never was resolved properly. And then so you get to a point where you have to forgive and basically forget and
Yeah.
move on and let it, cut it loose and let it go, because it's the only way that we can sort of get the poisonous barb out of our chest. So, that's, I think, the most important lesson in that aspect, because most, I think, of the suffering that we experience is through people.
Yeah.
You can have a head-on collision with a tree in a car, and it's pretty bad, right? And
Yeah.
other sort of experiences like that. But other than that, it's people, and
Yeah.
it's pain because of usually betrayal. I think you can sum it up with that: betrayal of trust at the root of it. It's brutal. And parents, friends, family, spouses, people in authority,
Yeah.
and that leads me to the big free speech battle that I've had, because that's all about betrayal at the highest levels of the artistic world, government run, art world,
Okay.
and betrayal of trust and abuse, being the victim of abuse, of partisanship. It's a whole other thing, a whole other battle that I've been in. That is the sort of where I am even now today, still 8 years into that battle, uh,
Wow.
for the vindication of rights, legal, First Amendment free speech rights, and again, this gets to the part of, it's not like a family relationship, it's not like a friend relationship. This is a citizen government thing where you then have to make a decision to stand or not, to vindicate your
Right.
rights because it's the right thing to do, or you're going to let these people just stomp on your life.
Yeah.
And so, I've learned a lot. And I think the most important thing is, when you can, you must, and you have to stand your ground and do what's right.
Yeah. That's a beautiful story that you have of resilience, of the journey that you've been on, um, the ups, the downs, the sideways turns, the revelations that you've had. It's phenomenal, and I thank you for sharing that with me and the audience as well, Julian. It's been amazing. Um,
Well,
I think.
kudos to you, Rich, because you have a real gift. I just want to say you have a real gift. You are able to mine the treasure, and that's such a critical component. Because yeah, I can have a story, but you are able to mine it and obviously present it to folks in a way that my direct sharing may not ever have happened. So I really appreciate being on today. It's been a real blessing.
Oh, thank you. That that means a lot. Honestly, it does. That that doesn't that doesn't sit in the present of my mind. When you're just trying something new, there's always that doubt that you have the
Oh, there's
capability.
there's no doubt. There's no doubt. It's wonderful.
I appreciate that immensely. One of the things I always love to leave the audience with is just a an encouragement, uh, and that is to always, always, always listen to your heart, but be kind to your mind.
Very